Namaskar, I am Sukriti Chakravarti, your host for the day. Welcome to Tathya 2021. Tathya is brought to you by Data Reveals, an effort run by truth seekers to validate narratives through empirical data. Media narratives are often lopsided. Anecdotal information is extrapolated as trend. Strawman fallacies are abound, and correlation is frequently confused with causation. Some journalists, film directors, and authors believe in the old expression, don't let the truth get in the way of a good story. Data Reveals is free for use public utility to ensure that the truth is not lost somewhere in all the noise. As it's customary, before we commence the formal ceremonies, we would like to begin with the invocation of the divine. May we now have Yogi ji and Lakshmi ji Chivakula render the invocation prayer.
दीपज्योतिवन्दनं विद्याज्योतिवन्दनं ज्ञानज्योतिवन्दनं विज्ञानज्योतिवन्दनम् धैर्यज्योतिवन्दनं विजयज्योतिवन्दनम् अभयज्योतिवन्दनम् ऐश्वर्यज्योतिवन्दनम् जीवज्योतिवन्दनं देवज्योतिवन्दनम् आत्मज्योतिवन्दनं परमात्मज्योतिवन्दनम् तथ्यज्योतिवन्दनं सत्यज्योतिवन्दनं धर्मज्योतिवन्दनं शान्तिज्योतिवन्दनं विश्वशान्तिज्योतिवन्दनं विश्वशान्तिज्योतिवन्दनं विश्वशान्तिज्योतिवन्दनम्
Thank you, Yogi ji and Lakshmi ji, especially for invoking Tathya in your prayer. On that auspicious note, we come to the opening highlight of Tathya. I would like to now invite Anurag Saxena ji, founder, writer, policy advisor, and board of advisors, Data Reveals, to make his opening remarks. He will now introduce someone who needs actually no introduction, an exemplary speaker, vivacious personality, and I might say, as a woman, a personal inspiration to me. Honorable Smriti Rani ma'am, for her keynote address. Over to you, Anurag ji.
Namaskar, everyone. It's a great honor for me, a great pleasure for me to introduce Smriti Raniji, who actually doesn't need any introduction. And with someone so eloquent, I'm not going to give any pearls of wisdom before she starts. The interest in correcting perceptions or narrative for me personally started in 1998 when I moved to the US. This was a fairly decent business school, and some of my classmates asked me if I owned a pet elephant that took me to school. So since then, the view that's formed on India. I live in Singapore now. The view that's formed in India through New York Times and Slumdog Millionaire is quite broken. Opinion pieces and fiction are forming the narrative of India outside and sometimes even within, which is why we have Tathya today. And and Smriti ji, somebody that has been specifically targeted and maligned. So we thought nobody better than her to respond to an event that is around correcting narratives in media, in governance, in diplomacy, and what have you. In line with the specific ministry she's heading right now, I've worn a true blue traditional kurta. But Smriti ji, personal joy for me, great honor for all of us to invite you to say a few words and open Tathya 2021. Over to you, Smriti ji.
I have the greatest privilege of being on a platform which delves into the real truth. Spinning of narratives is not the entitlement of the few who feel that politics or policies can be ridden on that path of untruth. I'm grateful that Team Tathya today inaugurates this platform for deliberation based on facts, and it is those facts that will become the fulcrum of policies that will help us build a new India. In his opening remarks, it was said that I have been at the receiving end of many untruths, at the receiving end of many false narratives. But I think that my journey has been such that I have been tested through fire, and blessedly, I have escaped that untruth unscathed. The intention with which I come on this platform today is to have an honest conversation. And I'm hopeful that everybody who comes onto this platform with Tathyas indulges in that journey, because ours is a civilization that has deliberated on issues for centuries. Ours is a society which has encouraged debate. Ours is a society that has thrived on informed conversations. So here's looking forward to a talk which will help as much as me as those who are listening to arrive at better positions, to arrive at more informed decisions. So I've been told by Anurag that I can go on for 5 minutes. I think Anurag mistakes me for one of those politicians who've been given a mic and who can endlessly chatter. I'm somebody who's focused on particular issues, and if I need to underline the issues on which possibly we will want to engage on, the first is the impact of narratives. Are those impacts only cultural? Are those impacts only societal? Or is there an economic agenda behind such narratives as well? The second topic, which is close to my heart, which I've requested Anurag to possibly delve into, is the so called phrase of women's empowerment. Now, my position is this, that too often we use that phrase to engage on issues with regards to gender. But we need to recognize that on an international matrix, when women's empowerment is judged, it is judged from the prism of economics and politics. Power sharing, or for that matter, sharing of revenue, becomes central to that narrative. And the one aspect that gets left behind is the cultural aspect of a woman's journey, or for that matter, the cultural impact on society with regards to a fallout on gender. So, given the complexities of a life of a woman, or for that matter, the complexities of a dynamic society such as ours, which is so diverse, where do we totally stand on the narrative of women empowerment, and how is data relatable to this phrase? So, I'm looking forward to, in fact, narratives, or for that matter, deliberations that emanate even from this a very essential conversation that needs to be had. Because if you look at Indian politics today, there has been a tectonic shift as to how women are perceived by administrators and policymakers. The Prime Minister has given the clarion call that now India is at the cusp of human history, where we will have not just women's development, but essentially to be a strong nation, we need to ensure women led development. So, how does an Atmanirbhar Bharat get served by a self reliant Indian woman? And what does data tell us about it? What are the narratives around it? I'm hopeful that on Tathya, this is also an aspect that can be deliberated.
Wonderful, Smriti ji. Such a pleasure again, honor again having you. Ji, if I may, in your opening remarks, you talked about the data lens and why data might not be serving our agenda. Would you mind elaborating on that for the audience?
I don't think, Anurag, it's about data serving our agenda. I think it's more about data serving the truth. And when it comes to women's issues, I think one of the greatest challenges when we look at international indices, for instance, the Gender Inequality Index, or for that matter, the Gender Development Index, where international conversations emanate about the potential of how India's policymakers or administrators are serving the cause of women in India. One of the greatest challenges that I have seen in my 1.5 years as a minister is that very old data sets are used, and hence, as a nation, when we think that we have done much progressively on issues with regards to women in education, in health, in financial services, the data doesn't reflect that reality. The other aspect is that there is a presumption that all data sets are applicable to all nations unilaterally, and the diversity or the complexity of a nation does not get reflected in that data. The other assumption is that all data available is the right data. And I think that I would like to add to it by saying that if I look at only how women are politically measured on such indices, they are measured from their participation, let's say, in parliament. For that matter, there is an addition of women being represented in state assemblies. But there is a third layer in India where we have 1.2 million women serving in our panchayats. Now, they don't find a reflection in international data sets. Given the fact that they are equally a vibrant contributor to our democracy, given the fact that with the devolution of enhanced funds from the center to states, and especially for the urban and rural infrastructure, looking at the number of women serving at the grassroots level, if we start having that number getting reflected in those indices, can you imagine the jump that India will see? The other instance is access to financial services and credit for women. In Mudra, or for that matter, Stand Up India, today we have over 10 crore female beneficiaries across all these financial services schemes of Government of India. That volume does not get reflected internationally. So when we had the pandemic, and I was in conversation with UN Women, the New York headquarters, I said that you need to recognize that for the first time, Prime Minister Modi has availed to at least 41 crore citizens banking facilities. These are people who were unbanked before that. But in the women's sphere, we had 28% of women in our country having banking facilities till 2014. That number doubled. And Jan Dhan Yojana, imagine now, has ensured that 22 crore women, that is 220 million women now have a bank account courtesy the Modi regime. And it is under that space that we saw cash transfers happen worth 30,000 crores. People in New York were surprised by the whole volume of the impact of the administration. But those data sets were not readily available there. So I think that the ask I have of Tathya 2021 is to not look at data sets only from the perspective of a narrative which is about journalism, but also extend it to human development indices, or for that matter, the contribution that the Prime Minister has done on these issues. So, be it education, be it health, be it women's issues, I think that you will serve the cause of data well when these conversations happen. I think not, because this is, like I said, one of the greatest aspects that goes untouched. You
Uh-huh.
see, it serves a lot of interests well. And if you permit, while we are recording, let me just add to when I spoke about women's issues or the human development index issue and data. So, from my own experience in WCD, which is the Women and Child Development Ministry, one of the most fascinating data that I challenged as minister in the realm of nutrition was
Mhm.
the narrative that malnourished children in our country, in fact, can be equated to sub-Saharan Africa. And when I became minister, I said that give me the data for the severely acutely malnourished children in our country.
Mhm.
Everybody pulled out data from the internet and said that, well, there are approximately 8 million such kids in the country. I said, how can you work on an approximation? Give me specific state-wise data. We wrote to every state. And why am I saying this? Is because there is a lot of budgetary allocation, because no state or no government would want such kind of a crisis to erupt in a nation such as ours, especially. And when I said that if I want to put in funds, I want to see where the problem areas are. So give me a confirmation on the number so that I can have adequate allocation and financial measures to support the solution. You'd be shocked. From 8 million, we went down to an approximate 1 million in just one communication.
Fascinating. Fascinating.
Which means that allocation, and many a times people say, "Aap budget zyada kyun nahi mang rahe?" This is the taxpayers' money. So if I have to use it prudently, I need to be pragmatic enough to have data sets available to me which are real, and then ensure that the taxpayers' money goes to people who genuinely need it. So right now in the ministry, we are in a process to ensure that now states go beyond that approximation. And I say, does your district collector or your chief medical officer get involved in determining if a child is severely acutely malnourished? They said no. So I said, who measures? So now we've started from January a whole nationwide campaign to say, if you have to declare a child severely acutely malnourished, that is a medical procedure. So now we've asked for specifics, and I'm sure that the numbers will go down further, and then we will have a specific number, a child who can get that service and support that the family so needs to help them come out of that state of malnourishment. Now, another data point, let me say this. Between the Ministry of Education and Ministry of Women and Child Development, we both service girls who are out of school. The competition was that school department always says nobody's dropping out. But the children's department always say a lot of people are dropping out. Why? Because the allocation was in the school division for people not to drop out. And in the children's division was to support kids who drop out. So when I started saying, why don't you correlate the data sets? In one district, I can't have school saying nobody's out of school, but my division saying that 20 kids are out of school. When we correlated that data set, we suddenly had from 17 lakh kids, it going down again to 9 lakhs. So I think that from these perspectives, these conversations are essential from a data perspective because they affect not only policy, they affect administrative approach, but more so they affect fiscal spending. So I'm hopeful that on your platform, issues beyond journalism can get addressed.
Absolutely, ma'am. That's a commitment I am making to you. In fact, I feel so energized as the father of a daughter myself. I feel so energized that we're taking this direction and getting Indian women their fair due. I'm almost ashamed that this is something I didn't know myself.
No, and I think, Anurag, why people like you who are so well informed would not know this, and I would not belie this, would not know this because there is a lot of money in spinning the false narrative. Like I said, that entire narrative then rests on allocation, on leakages. So the minute you try to ensure that there is a direct cash transfer into the account of the beneficiary, when you get these data sets, I think that's when leakages also stop. So the narrative sustains, and you will not find the correct data internationally or any other social media platform because it helps those people to sustain the false narrative. For instance, a company will come and give you a quick fix for a severely acutely malnourished child and say, let the government spend, let's say, 100 rupees on one packet so that this child will have a quick fix and I'll give you a certificate that all is well with India. But what they will not tell our people is that a drumstick soup is much more effective, which is made, let's say, in $5. So I think that is why these kind of data sets or these kind of conversations do not take place, because it is that status quo that will get shaken up.
Absolutely, and I think the only way to sort out imbalanced incentives which get people to to push themselves and the system in lopsided ways, is to actually put tathya or facts or truth out there. So I'm so glad, I'm so glad we had this conversation, and that you're offering your ministry to be put under greater scrutiny than it has
Happy
been
to.
in the past.
Happy to.
On. And if we could just have the honor of you formally declaring Tathya 2021 open. And again, like I said, I can't thank you enough from the bottom of my heart for being here. The direction you've set for us, what, the quick thing on women, um, there's a small secret I'd like to let you in. When we were deliberating about setting this up, this was in the end of 2019. There was an event that you spoke of, and this is something perhaps you also don't know. This was at the Bloomberg conference in Bombay, where you happened to mention that as a woman, you feel as safe in India as you do in New York. 1 hour in, there was this whole narrative being set out from Lutyens news studios, uh, comparing it to the whole Bombay ko Shanghai banayenge movement. Luckily, we had data at that point of time to actually prove that the per capita crimes against women were far lesser in India than in New York City, New York State, or the US in general.
Yes.
That was one of the reason which actually encouraged us to say कि हाँ यार इस idea में दम है. We need to stop painting us Indian men black, especially when we have data for it. So personally, it's an honor for me.
I don't say all
Thank
Indian
you.
men are perfect, but I'm grateful that they accept their flaws. But I'll not have them flogged internationally for an issue which is topical to every nation. So yes, I support you on that.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, madam. And if you could just declare the event open, that would be a great honor for us.
It is my absolute privilege and with pride I announce that Tathya 2021 be open.
Thanks, everyone. Stay tuned for the panels, for the convocation. We have Suresh Prabhuji coming in, a host of speakers. Thank you, madam, again, or as we say, Dhanyosmi, for gracing this event. We look forward to your interaction, your guidance in the future as well. Dhanyosmi.
Thank you.
Wow, that was inspirational. How many ministers would you know who invite great scrutiny, provide facts, provide tathya proactively? It has been an honor, ma'am, for all of us, and thank you, Anuragji, for moderating it. It's time now, dear audience, for us to welcome our stellar lineup of speakers, each dignitaries in their own right. Let's begin the first stupendous panel session for Tathya 2021. Our first session for today is on new narratives, reversing a colonized gaze. We literally have an international panel lined up for this. Joining us from London are Amish Tripathi ji, acclaimed author and director of Nehru Center, Manoj Ladwaji, chairman and CEO of India Inc. Group. From Singapore, we have Anurag Saxena ji, writer, policy advisor, board of advisor for Data Reveals. Last but not the least, Anand Ranganathan ji, author, scientist, and TV personality. Let's welcome them with a round of applause.
Really, really glad to welcome you to the session on narratives on Tathya. We have a great panel here today. We have Amish Tripathi, who now heads the Nehru Center in London. We have Manoj Ladwa, well-known lawyer, runs India Inc., again based out of London. And of course, we have the incorrigible Anand Ranganathan, who's decided to attend a session on anti-colonialism in a suit. The the interesting format with today is there are no moderators. This is just a conversation. We start with a quick 1 minute introduction of a big idea on our topic, which is new narratives reversing a colonial gaze. From there, we move on into a 20-minute discussion on ideas, thoughts, actionables, and deliverables. And then we have a quick wind up. With that, I'm going to hand it over to Amish. So let's go in the order of the screen you see here: Amish, Manoj, Anand, and then myself. So your one big idea, Amish: how do we reverse a colonial gaze?
Look, I think the biggest problem is decolonizing our own minds. So many of us Indians, Indians in India and Indians indeed abroad as well, still see our own land from a colonial perspective. So, for example, many Indians believe that India wasn't a nation and the British Raj created it, which is utter nonsense. It's not true. There are enough texts from the Vishnu Puran, ancient texts, which refer to India as a cultural nation. Anyway, the concept of a nation state came with the Westphalian system, which is only 200, 300 years old. Our concept of looking at ourselves as a loser nation which kept repeatedly losing to invaders. Again, there's a colonial narrative. The actual truth is that India is the toughest nation around because we are the only pre-Bronze Age culture which is still alive. Every single other pre-Bronze Age culture surrendered to the invaders. There were two groups essentially, Turks and Europeans, who wiped out all pagan cultures across the world. Again, we actually believe those colonial narratives. We do not know our own narratives when it comes to, I'm not just talking about our ancient traditions in terms of spirituality, but in proper knowledge systems, science, maths, navigation. Damascus steel was actually invented in India. Surgery did actually happen in ancient India. Many of these gems of knowledge we actually don't know. So the first step, if we want to change the colonial narrative, is we have to decolonize ourselves first. It should be done ideally through the education system, through the government. But look, it's a big task. We are fighting back 800 years of of suppression. So all of us need to push back.
I'd like to pick up on Amish's point, and I couldn't agree more about decolonizing ourselves. And as somebody that has been born and brought up in the UK, that has gone through the English education system, I think the fascination or preoccupation with colonialism and the Raj is more in India than it is here in the UK. And I know that, having gone through the education system here, the issues of empire and colonialism are issues of the past. They're not a preoccupation here, but I see that more and more as a preoccupation in India. And so my big point I want to make is that we all come from a broadly similar background on this panel, where we believe that on balance, this the current government and the current narratives that are being setting are broadly good for India. We may have our different nuances, but I fear that there's a danger that we may fall into where we're adopting the narratives of the West. Words such as progressive and liberal, left and right, nationalist and versus patriot. These have different weightages in the West, but we're using those same idioms and those same terminologies to describe some of the events and decisions that are going on in India. And I think we need to come out of that particular mindset. For example, a lot of what has happened over the last 6 years, in my view, has been extremely progressive and extremely liberal, whether it's on issues of climate change, on women's empowerment, on the abolition of triple talaq, and so on. These are progressive and liberal idioms. Similarly, this whole left and right debate, we need to move away from that, because frankly, the weightage of left and right in politics and in the West is completely different from what it is in India. So again, along with decolonizing ourselves, part of that process has to be to look at the terminologies that we use again, because that has a big impact upon how others view us.
Yeah, first of all, thanks very much, Anurag, for having me. It's really it's a privilege to be in an esteemed company, and I do agree. I think wholeheartedly with what Amish said about the continuity of our civilization, Indian civilization, and to a very large extent to what Manoj said about the labels that people put very freely, left wing, right wing. I think the problem stems, and since you asked for one big idea that we can debate, and all of us have given those ideas, I think for me, I think the problem stems from just one word: selectivity, and the fear of not being objective. And where does that stem from? I think we believe what we see, but more often than not, what we see is written by those who see what they believe, and what they believe is their ideology or their politics or their friends or where they would like to be or where they would like to see their country to be. And when I say at the heart lies the selectivity, it stems ironically from, I think most of the narratives that are peddled nowadays are increasingly less so by books and writers, but more so by journalists. They're all over the place. And I think there ought to be more, while there ought to be more journalism in science, to let us decide on various topics that are very important for nation building, GMO and space science and all that. I think there ought to be more science in journalism as well. And I think that's the heart of the thing, that what science teaches you, A, is humility, B is objectivity, C is prior citation. So if you cannot progress, you cannot write a scientific paper without having references, so which means prior citations. Now, in every narrative that we've seen in the last 7 years that's been peddled, that column or that subtopic of references is entirely missing. You can pick up anything. Your fake church attacks, you would talk endlessly about it without giving prior citations to what was happening during the UPA. You would talk about mob lynchings without giving prior citations to what. So everything is as if almost it gives the impression that it's happening for the first time. It's almost as if in 2014 there was this Cambrian explosion, and everything that could go wrong with India started to go wrong. Before 2014, everything was Garden of Eden, and nothing of the sort. If we look at, for example, freedom of speech and expression, the stifling of it, and every issue, everything has been done and dusted before Modi came to power. And just to pick up loosely, and I'm sure we'll probably debate more on this, what Manoj said about the labels, left wing, right wing, I entirely agree. In fact, I've said this before, that to me, more appropriate than right wing or left wing is whether one is social Darwinian or not social Darwinian, because that is the most dangerous aspect that people have misappropriated, if I may say so, from Darwin's theory of evolution. That is the misreading. That is increasingly for the right wing, survival of the fittest. That is what has actually given birth to empires, and we can talk about Churchill and all. And B, what the left wing takes from it, which is this thing about rationalizing suffering. That is what we are doing. We are doing it for you, for the greater good. And these are mortal concepts that have been completely misappropriated from Darwin's theory, where one of the greatest evolutionary endowments, more than survival of the fittest and adaptation, is actually empathy. And people, whenever they talk of Darwin's theory, they talk of survival of the fittest, which is one half of it. The other half, that would have been impossible without empathy towards other people, towards other living beings, so on and so forth. So I think these are the concepts that we must bring more science and the way science is conducted into our narrative, and I think things would probably fall into place.
In fact, it's amazing. I would take off exactly from where you left off, which is we need more science, we need more repeatability, reliability, provability in narratives, as versus just an opinion piece that, hey, as a woman I feel unsafe and therefore India is unsafe, or you have a Salam Bombay and a Slumdog Millionaire, which goes out and say, hey, India is filthy, so you end up saying, hey, it's filthy. And that's exactly what data reveals is set out to do, which is to say, hey, listen, let's look at crime data and then build a narrative on how safe or unsafe women are. Is it an India issue? Is it a patriarchy issue? Let's look at per capita, plastic waste or air pollution or whatever, and then let's get to a conclusion that India is filthy. I mean, you look at Lord of the Rings and you imagine New Zealand to be this really pristine, clean place. You watch Slumdog Millionaire and everything seems to be a gutter, and that's how these perceptions are formed, and that's precisely what we'd like to change. But I think more importantly, and I'm just going to agree with Manoj's point here. And this is something I deeply care about. I write about it as well. That the whole idea of othering, left versus right, progressive versus conservative, liberal versus whatever. The whole idea of othering is perhaps the most dangerous export from the Western world, which we as Indians, or might I say even Asians, have bought into. I mean, I live in Singapore, and I can see all of us in India, and Thailand, and Singapore, and Malaysia living with a whole bunch of contradictions. As an example, I wear a kalaba and rudraksh, and interestingly, I use a Blackpink mouse because that's my daughter's favorite band, and both of these can coexist. And that, unfortunately, is something that the whole idea of India being a land of contradictions, where India needs to shun Western construct, Western labels, Western othering, and propose our own models is something that to me is very interesting. If we could, guys, spend a quick 10 minutes on purely on an actionable perspective. Let's say, you could have people from media, you could have people from government watching the show, or let's just say an average citizen, or it could be an NRI, a PIO for that matter. How do you think we can overcome the idea of labeling, the idea of being of rejecting our past and the glory from it, or the idea of preferring arts over science when it comes to how narratives are built. So whichever order you guys want to go in, how do you think we actually overcome this challenge?
Okay. Sorry, go. Okay, go ahead, Manoj.
Okay. Anurag, if I come in here, look, this is something that we need to really take a step back, first of all, and sort of realize that, look, the trap that I think all of us are recognizing is that we're moving into a world with instant press a button and something happens, and therefore one tweet means that I've solved the problems of the world. And that absolutism that also Anand referred to, and we've all been talking about, we need to get away from that and think much more long term. And when I say long term, ultimately it rests upon institution building. And the one thing of colonialism that if we are to take something from it, is the investment in building institutions, whether it's in terms of governance or business, or in our case, media institutions. Whether you look at the BBC or other platforms around the world, they have set these narratives based upon economic and strategic interests of the countries from which they've been. India has not invested in building narrative-setting institutions. Now, and just to my final point on this is that I don't subscribe to this. This is biased and this is unbiased. Everybody has a perspective, and I think that is the Indian philosophical position, that we present perspectives and we allow other perspectives. Bias, non-bias, that's not of that's a trivial issue for me. So building strong institutions, whether it's in terms of training of journalists, whether it's in terms of building media platforms that have got a global outlook, that's where I think a lot of the investment now needs to take place.
And it's very interesting if you remember. Sorry, Amish, I'm butting in just 10 seconds. Manoj, if you remember the last panel discussion we were on, and I find that's something fascinating. And just to refer people to what you're doing now, and back then, there's a whole bunch of us that would go and complain about this media house is biased and that media house is unfair and they have an agenda and what have you. But it's fascinating. You've gone out and and set up India Inc. दुश्मन के घर पे घुस के वार करेंगे. So sitting in the UK, you've said, listen, here is somebody that will tell our stories in our language, in our terms, and for our strategic interest. And I think it's fascinating to look at this challenge from a solution perspective, rather than a whining or a cringing kind of point of view. So I think it's fascinating, and thank you for doing what you do. Sorry, Amish, I butt in, but yeah, please go ahead.
So I just want to add, three quick things. One is that part of the Western confidence, in what everyone has a bias, right? There is no one truth, not in the Indian way, not at least among us human beings. One truth is only at the divine level, right? The confidence of the Western world comes in their belief in one truth, that their bias is the one truth, and all of us are worshippers of false gods, right? We try and argue from their paradigm. We have to put that key paradigm across. There is no one truth. There is your bias and there's my bias. There's my truth and there's your truth, and we have to present our point of view. Even their liberalism comes with a universal perspective that their truth is the truth. That's one aspect. It's a deeper philosophical aspect. Two more key things that I want to add is data is important, right? Especially when one is arguing at an academic level, at an opinion maker level, hopefully even at a think tank level. But at a mass level, what works is storytelling, right? Data bores people out. There's a reason why Western media is able to get its narratives out. They realize the importance of picking one story and building a narrative out of it. This is something that we have to learn, how to communicate stories. There's a reason why fiction books sell so much more than non-fiction books, often, right? Uh, Stories work a lot more. We have to learn that. Data is important. I'm not denying it. Do it only at the opinion maker level, at the academic level. We shouldn't remove the importance of stories even in journalism. That's what actually creates narratives. Um, and the third thing that in my mind is critical is that when we go out to communicate, we must look. We are not so big that we can communicate to the entire world, right? We have to pick our markets, which then cascade down. And here I want to point out the importance of the Anglophone world. There's a reason why the Chinese have invested so much money in Hollywood movies and not in French movies, even though French movies are better, right? Because most of the world does not watch French movies, they watch Hollywood movies. You impact the Anglophone world, it cascades down to the entire world. So you have to focus your narrative efforts. And within those countries, there are 4 or 5 cities which decide their cultural memes. So we have to focus our efforts, and also within that, this whining and hyper aggression does not work. It has to be quiet confidence. It has to be calm. It has to be the way this conversation is happening. Confident, but not unnecessarily hyper aggressive, shouting, screaming. That doesn't work.
Okay, so hyper aggressive shouting,
Yeah,
screaming
I
obviously
was.
takes us to takes us to Anand. But
I was just about to say I was feeling a bit out of place out here. What's going on? We have a panel where no one's heckling, no one's interrupting. I mean, this is ridiculous. No, but in fact, I'd set out to before Amish, had his say, to give just 2 examples, one of Ambedkar and one of Churchill. But before I do that, may I please disagree with my good friend Amish when he says that everyone has biases and there is no one truth. It is true everyone has biases, but everyone need not have biases. And I for one, believe that there is only one truth.
There are facts. There are facts.
Yeah.
But one truth in terms of the interpretation of that, at least in the Indian way, all of us are triggered by. Oh, sorry. I'll not interrupt.
No, no, no.
I will not do the
Okay.
TV thing. Sorry.
No, but Anand, I'm going to complicate. I'm going to complicate with whatever you're saying. So let's go back to the foundation of psychology and psychiatry. So whether it's Carl Jung, whether it was Carl Rogers who said it. Now the whole idea is, look, we agree with you on facts, But then there's this whole angle of evaluative beliefs, archetypes, memes,
Which is what makes the
upbringing,
truth.
culture. Yeah. So you and I could see an orangutan, but it could mean very different things to us. So yeah. So Amish and I, now that we've complicated whatever you were going to say,
Yes.
please.
So if you were to bring in that, if you were to bring in that perspective of, or I would say a new definition of truth, then what you say is right, because what you mean is truth is a composite of opinion, perspective, and things of that sort. For me, truth is fact. I mean, I've said this before. I'm not much of a fan of gray. I'm a fan of black and white, because I think being gray lends a bit of hypocrisy to what you believe. I mean, for example, you can say Mao did a lot of good things, and you can ignore that he killed 63 million of his own people. You can wear a Che Guevara T-shirt and ignore that he was homophobic. He was, he undertook mass executions. So you can swing both ways if you believe in the gray. But if you believe in the black and white, if you believe, for example, that human cell has a nucleus, that is the truth.
Yeah,
There is,
that's a fact. Yeah.
or for example, the B form of DNA is double helical. That's the truth. Things of that sort. So I think if we stick to that, then we can very easily demarcate what is opinion and what is truth, i.e., fact. So one need not overlap, and one need not have a very composite definition of truth. But if you do, then what you say is absolutely right. But I think what you say also has a lot of meaning, because you are delving into philosophy, and I believe there is something which is bigger and greater than science. Science is just a stepping stone towards philosophy. And the first thing I tell my students is that, what is the degree you're going to get? Is it degree of science? There's a PhD. Well, it is a doctorate in philosophy. Don't think of yourself as scientist. That's just a stepping stone. Science is a stepping stone. But coming back very quickly to what you said, take home ideas. I think I do repeat. I think we need to completely banish selectivity. Almost it's become so visceral that we do indulge in it subconsciously. I mean, to give you an example, because I talked of Churchill. So Churchill, he was an absolute rascal, mass murderer, racist. The guy who is directly responsible for murdering 4.5 million Bengalis during the Bengal famine, as out and out imperialist. He was the guy who first perpetrated the chemical gas attack, almost phosgene attack in the Middle East. He was the one who felt proud that the Tasmanian indigenous population had been wiped out, annihilated by the Australians. So he was an archetypal social Darwinian. And yet, at the dawn of this millennium, when the BBC conducted the greatest Britain of all time, starting from William the Conqueror, who stood at number one? Churchill. So why is it that the Brits still feel that Churchill is the greatest Briton of all time? This is because they believe Churchill won them the war, and they are prepared to overlook all his evils. And one guy who's always a lesson for me is Ambedkar, because there was this book by, I think, Catherine Mayo, called what was it called, Mother India, and it came out. In fact, it was really hailed by the Brits as something which is reflects the true Indian society, but it was hated by the Indians, and Gandhi called it the gutter inspector's report. And in fact, Ambedkar was the one who actually, nowadays you would say, well, Ambedkar is indulging in whataboutery. But whataboutery is essential to expose the hypocrisy. You could condemn the recent occurrences, but you have to ask, if you're honest, that, and not selective, that these things have happened before, or why are you ignoring, things that have happened before? And this is what Ambedkar said. And if I can remember, I can't remember the exact quote, what he said. He said, people who've read Miss Mayo's book, Mother India, might be left with the impression that all the evils are solely restricted to the Hinduism and the Hindu society. That it is only Hindus who are, wallowing in this mud of primeval thinking, medieval outlook, patriarchy. And while the Muslims have it all rosy, there is nothing wrong in Islam. There is nothing wrong in the way Muslim society conducts itself. Anyone who comes across or goes away with that opinion has to have his eyes checked or something. I'm paraphrasing Ambedkar. So here was Ambedkar, who left no stone unturned in exposing the evils that are there in casteism in Hinduism. Ambedkar of today would have been completely selective about only highlighting the ills of Hinduism. In fact, Ambedkar changed his religion. He hated Hinduism so much that he became a Buddhist. But the same guy also said that let us not expose only the ills of Hinduism. Let us also expose the ills of other religions. So, you could maybe the editors of Scroll and Wire today would, or Caravan, would boycott Ambedkar and say, look at this whataboutery he is indulging in. Let's downvote Ambedkar's books. He's become a Sanghi or something. But, that's a lesson for me. Someone who's, sorry.
Sorry, Anand. I feel terrible doing this because this is exactly revving up now, and I feel terrible really stopping you here. But we've had the moderators telling us we have 3 minutes to go.
Sorry.
So, I'll let you continue, Anand. What I'd like each of us to do, and starting with you, Anand, because I really don't want to kind of stop your flow there. 30 seconds, each of us 30 seconds, with one simple suggestion, idea, word of advice, or whatever to anyone watching this show on what, as citizens, as audience, what could we do if we need to be even a small part of ultimately changing that narrative or moving the needle. What can each of us do in the audience? 30 seconds each, and then we'll wind it up. So let's start with you, Anand.
Yeah, I think what any reader or viewer should do is whenever he comes across any instance, whether it is a positive instance or a negative instance, he must think of what is called prior citations or a reference. Has this happened before? Has this good thing happened before? If it has, why aren't we giving credit to the person who did it first? And if it's a bad thing, I condemn it has happened now, but has it happened before? If it has, why are you giving the impression that this is happening for the first time? I think if these two things happen, which is exactly what I meant, bring some more, science, the way science conducts itself into our modern narrative.
And I'm going to pick up on that and continue on that tail. So my one piece of advice, guys, is if you come across any narrative that clearly looks jaded, biased, tinted, whatever it is, social media at the end of the day is a huge equalizer. Please use data, please use facts. There's enough available around. You have Google. Hopefully data reveals will get there, that we'll have 100 pieces of analysis done busting a lot of these myths. Every time you see somebody going and building a false narrative out there, please counter it immediately. You've done your bit in putting the truth out there, whether or not mainstream media allows it, whether it not bubbles up on top or whatever it is. But yeah, let's move a conversation from a right brain opinion conversation to a left brain factual conversation. And that's when India starts getting seen for what it is rather than what it is made out to be. With that, over to Amish and then closing to Manoj. 30 seconds, Amish.
Look, the way I see it, there are 1.38 billion of us. Every single one of us is an ambassador. If we see it from that perspective, we're an ambassador for Mother India, and then we should behave accordingly. So read as much as you can. There are so many positive things that are happening. It's probably one of the best times to be an Indian in the last millennium, right? I was speaking to someone of saying that someone was saying that look how bad things are in India. Then they just answered, you think it was better during Aurangzeb's time? Look where we are now. So it is one of the best times to be an Indian. Speak of the good that is happening in India. Lots of improvements have happened. Poverty has reduced. Casteism has come down. We are united. We have a stable, strong state. There are many good things. Criticize what deserves to be criticized as well. There's nothing wrong with that. That criticism should come from love, not from hatred, because we want Mother India to improve. Lastly, if you are an ambassador for Mother India, whichever foreigner, whoever you speak to, realize that you're an ambassador, which means you should speak with manners and respect. Often in the modern day, we have forgotten the value of good manners. Our ancestors used to tell us, Satyam Bruat Priyam Bruat Na Bruat Satyam Apriyam. That speak the truth, but speak it with love. And if you cannot speak it with love, then don't speak it. They didn't tell us to lie. They just said, speak it with love. You'll be shocked how much you can get across and convince those in the center, which are 80% of the people, if you just speak with manners and grace.
Perfect. Manoj, over to you. And I'm going to give you the
I have to
responsibility of
interrupt. I have to interrupt and say that Amish can never be a member of parliament.
I was going to say that he can certainly become a fantastic ambassador. And his tenure in London is surely proving that. I have the hard task of trying to summarize some of these excellent thoughts and ideas. So, firstly, to take on Anand's point about selectivity, I totally agree that we've got to be very clear. Firstly, we've got to be upfront that if we believe in something, then say it and be clear about it, but back it by data and facts. And the work that Anurag, you guys are doing at Data Reveals is extremely, extremely important to support the sorts of arguments and the supports of views that we have in terms of our positions on world affairs and indeed on explaining issues in India as well. Secondly is that we've got to be very clear. Does the Western narrative matter or doesn't matter? Let's be clear about that, because we cannot be selective that sometimes it does matter, other times no, we don't give a monkeys about what's happening in the West and what they think about us. Does it matter or it doesn't matter? Sitting here in the West and talking about India and supporting some of the work that happens in India, I think it does matter. And therefore, you've got to be in the game. And if you're in the game, support it with data, support the media organizations and platforms, like the platforms that Anand writes on and works with, and India Inc. and so on. Support us in that particular journey. Tweet us, write to us, build on these institutions that have already been started as well. And to take Amish's point, is that we have a bigger responsibility now, because 1/4 of the world's workforce within the next 15 years will be Indian. We have a tremendous opportunity to influence the shape of the future shape of the world and that narrative. And we have a huge responsibility, not just for India, but for the world. And I think with that responsibility comes, with that insight comes a lot of responsibility. And going back to my final point, we need to support and build institutions that communicate India's perspectives to the world.
Perfect. Thank you guys. Thanks Amish. Thanks Manoj. Thanks Anand.
Very much. Thank you.
Huge pleasure having you guys here. A word of a huge thank you to the audience as well. It's a Saturday morning. It's perhaps midnight for you guys if you're in the UK. It's late in the evening on Friday if you're in the US. You could have been anywhere else and you chose to be here. So thank you guys for it. Enjoy the rest of the sessions and we'll talk to you soon.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks very much.
Wow, that was mind blowing. I wish we could have gone on longer. Seriously, we barely had time to skim the surface. And that's what makes these panels exciting, isn't it? Well, here is a question for you all at audience. Are you tweeting, cooing right now using your phones? If not, then flip your phones and tag Amish ji, Manoj ji, Anurag ji, and Anand ji and tell them how you liked their discussion. Do it right now. I'm waiting. And also, don't forget to use the hashtag Tathya 2021. While India emerges and builds its strength internally, it is important that the world sees a new emerging nation. Discussing how India claims its space in the world, it's an exciting erudite panel on New World Order repositioning India in the world's eyes. May I welcome Syed Akbaruddin ji, who we all have seen repositioning a bold new India at United Nations. Accompanying him is Manjeet Kriplani ji, founder chairperson of Gateway House. Gautam Chikkamane ji, author, commentator, and VP with Observer Research Foundation. And Nitin Gokhale ji, author and senior defense policy expert. Trust me, guys, we sat on the preparatory call for this panel last weekend and some brilliant grand ideas came up. You wouldn't want to miss it.
Good morning and welcome to this session. Although this format, as Anurag has told us, even during the preparatory session, there are no moderators in this session. So I would not waste time in any opening remarks or anything. Just let's go across in this order. Syed Akbaruddin, our former diplomat and ambassador to UN, then followed by Gautam, then by Manjeet, and then I will make my 1 minute remark at the end of all three of you having done that, and then we will get into the 20-minute discussion. So over to you, Ambassador Akbaruddin.
Thank you, Nitin, and it's a privilege to be among all of you to look at how we reposition ourselves in a new world order. Now, it's a given that the current world order is in disarray. It's also evident that in such situations, states jostle for greater ascendancy. The last time this happened was following World War II. We were not an independent actor then as India, and we are still, what I could say is seeing the impact of what happened then. It's taken us 75 years and we're still struggling to change that narrative. So today, things are different. There's a new India, which is keen to gain a place in accordance with its natural stature globally. And so we have to look at the world very differently. So far, our investments in the global order are minimal. If I take data and try and put this in terms, purely rather crass terms of monetary contributions, we contribute something like 50 million to the UN annually. If I take all international organizations, and I mean all international organizations globally, this figure would rise to something around 70 to 75 million. Now, that's our investment. Now, this investment cannot sustain our goals to be a greater actor on the global stage. Let me just give you some examples of what others' investments are, and then we can understand it. The US, for example, contributes about $3 billion to the United Nations. It contributes $10 billion to global international organizations. China contributes something like $1 billion+ to the United Nations, and if you take all global organizations, it will be double that. Germany contributes something like $7 billion to global international organizations. Now, in that competition, where are we with 75 million? So if we have one big audacious idea that I would like to throw is that we need to ramp up our investments. Like it happens in all institutions, you invest more, you will reap later. So if I have to give you one suggestion of what India needs to do is that we need to ramp up our investments on global international organizations, say by a factor of 10. And I leave you with that thought, and I'm ready to answer later on. Thank you very much for giving me this opportunity.
Over to you, Gautam. We are talking about repositioning India in the world's eyes.
Yeah, the opening remarks were fantastic, and I think my big idea flows from and strengthens Akbaruddinji's. As an idea, grand strategy. I'm going to talk about why it's important for India now to have a grand strategy. As an idea, grand strategy will find a new expression in the first half of the 21st century, globally and in India, in large nations as well as small. They will be forced to do this. It will be a precursor to the creation of a new world order. This new world order will be shaped by two competing ideologies, the democratic and the authoritarian. And as we all know, the fundamental designs of these two opposing ideas will be created by the US and China. India's grand strategy will be shaped by many of these conflicting grand strategies. These will include engaging with the grand strategies of the US and China, of course. But equally, India will need to intersect and influence the grand strategies of the EU, Russia, and Pakistan. Above all, the starting point of building a big, strong grand strategy will be, or what you can call the first leg of India's grand strategy will be economic power. The $3 trillion economy going on 5 and then on 10, India needs to think about, craft, and execute its own grand strategy in the economic context first. As a country that will be the world's third largest within this decade, India will need to rethink the way it pursues its interests and engages with the rest of the world. The two feed each other, as the previous speaker just mentioned. If we want a greater play, for instance, in the global multilateral institutions, we should be strong enough domestically. The last leg of creating and debating India's grand strategy will have to be framed within and anchored to the question, who are we? That is, as Amish mentioned earlier, understanding that India is an old civilization but a new country. The strategic wisdom of the past must inform India as it negotiates a complex world tomorrow. There are deep grand strategy insights that India in the 21st century can glean and adapt from the ancient past to power its future vision. In a line, it's time for India to start thinking about, crafting, and executing its own grand strategy.
Great. I think that sets the stage for what we are looking for in the coming 20 years or 40 years. But over to you, Manjeet, for your minute or minute and a half, and then I'll come in there.
Thank you very much. Can you hear me? Is that
Yes.
a sound okay? Thank you.
Yeah.
So I think for India to find a place in the new world order, it needs to look at itself from within. We need to build intellectual capacity, and that includes scholarship, institution building. On scholarship in particular, I will say we have lots of new private colleges coming up. That's really fantastic. We need to get more exchanges, places in universities for foreign professors to teach and foreign students. We need lots of them from the West in particular for the narrative to change, because the English language media dominates the discourse, and also from Japan, from our own region in Asia. The Ministry of External Affairs does some of it, but not enough. We need the private colleges to start just attracting them naturally. Secondly, we need to build residences for scholars, and these are postgraduate institutions, for economists, for social scientists, for philosophers to come spend 3 months in India, write books. These are the ambassadors of India when they go back to their countries and they change the narrative. Secondly, we've got a fantastic product. This is an intellectual engagement with India. We've got India Stack. This is a public good, and it is a change. It's going to change the model of the digital world. We have not been able to use India Stack as an Indian product. Just now, there's a huge battle going on in the world with China state-owned model with digitization. In the US, it's a company-owned model. Europe is neither here nor there. They haven't really started a company of their own, but India has this, and it is from our software. So we need to start, especially Ministry of External Affairs, I think needs to start talking up this fantastic model that is an equalizer for the world. And lastly, we need to get a good multilateral in India. And this is not just the Solar Alliance. We need to start setting up something like the BRICS Research Institute, in India, where we can get lots and lots of economists to come in. And this has to be outside of Delhi. We cannot have a Delhi-centric India narrative. We just cannot. It has to be in Mumbai, the financial center. It has to be in Chennai. It has to be in Bangalore. We need these multilateral research institutions where we can put our own ideas coming out from the developing world, so that other developing countries, Brazil has fantastic economists, Hungary has great economists. We need all these people to come to India to sit here and work for years on end and create new ideas, new narratives.
Great. In fact, that really gives me an opportunity to talk about what I thought would be one grand idea, and that is building India's own narratives, building media platforms, and not just one platform to tell the India story with a global outlook. I think the Indian narrative has been run for so long from elsewhere. That needs to change. And I think if we have to do all three of you have said before me, that story needs to be sold in a manner that the world understands, and it doesn't come from other arbiters from the West. We also need to have more and more Indians learning the Mandarin language, because that's going to be another competition that is coming up. English we are strong in, but if we get equally large number of Mandarin speakers and people who understand China, which is going to be a most important country either way, as a competitor, as a country that cooperates with India on some of the issues, we need to have that, because this narrative building has to change. And just giving one example, China today has 170 odd bureaus worldwide of just the Xinhua news agency. Compare that with India. We don't have anybody reporting the world from elsewhere. We are reporting the world from India. That must change. That money that it has to be invested not just by the government but also by the private sector. So we need to manage our own narrative, to control our own destiny, is what my grand idea is. So I think now we should open up for a larger discussion. And again, we'll go in that order. We have, I think, another 20 minutes to go. So all of you can start. I mean, if Ambassador Akbaruddin can start, and then we can come again in the same order and discuss whatever we have discussed so far, and have a reaction to that maybe, or put your own ideas ahead of I mean, in front of this audience here who have joined from various parts of the world. Over to you.
Thank you, Nitin. And let me begin with your idea of a narrative. A narrative building is a long-term investment. It's not going to come if we invest one time. In fact, it will have to be over the next 20 or so years. What we've done over the last 20 or so years is we've become more insular in terms of narrative building. Look at, for example, our leading agency, PTI. It used to have correspondents in several other places. Today, it shrunk. The world, look at our newspapers. We are thinking that the world is only, if you look at the international aspects of our newspapers, they cover maybe 10% or 15 or 20%, and nothing of interest to developing India. For example, the Gulf. We have 7 million people of Indian origin or Indians in the Gulf. How much is reported about them in our newspapers? So it needs a shift of thinking. We need to be less insular. As we've grown economically, unfortunately, we are becoming more insular. We need to be more open-minded, invest in the broader terms. If we have to reposition ourselves, partly it will have to be done in India, as was said, economically, but partly it will also have to be engagements globally, as was said by Dr. Kripalani, and the idea of a grand strategy. Yes, without a grand strategy, we are nowhere, because big powers have big aspirations, big plans, and big hopes. Unless we work on those, we will be nowhere, because there are so many others who are already plotting the next 100 years, the next 200 years. These opportunities come once in a century, perhaps. In the last century, they came twice, one after the First World War, one after the Second World War. And after that, they haven't come. This is our chance. We shouldn't let go of that opportunity. On all three counts, I support all three of you. Thank you.
Sure. Gautam?
So I think, I don't think, I'm certain. I'm certain that I agree with all of you. And I want to question the underlying. Mr. Akbaruddin said we need to spend more in multilateral agencies, United Nations, and so on. Manjeet said we need more research institutions and such like. You said that media needs to go global, all of which requires money. You know something? Even that underlying is changing. Without money, we cannot move forward. And for the first time that I have been tracking the economy in my career and even historical readings of whatever I have done of independent India, it is the first time that we have a serving prime minister who has said that wealth creation is a virtue. People must work towards it. You can't keep painting all wealth creators in the black. They create jobs, they create value, they create wealth, and they deliver taxes. From the taxes, Akbaruddinji's aspirations will get fulfilled in terms of getting investing globally. From the other parts of the money, Manjeet will, as they create wealth, Nitin, the media conglomerates we can expect large conglomerates to rise from India, some of which have already begun to do the work. Let me give you one small change that is required domestically, so that to me, all this is part of a grand strategy. These are all international footprints, but they are based out of hard economics within. So let me tell you the challenges that India faces. Of my own grand strategy, I'm going to now critique it, which is that for doing business, there are 1,400 laws that Indian entrepreneurs need to negotiate. These are state as well as union laws. There are 6,000 annual filings that businesses need to do at an aggregate. Each filing has scores and scores, sometimes 100 individual data points that need to be done. There are 70,000 compliances, 70,000, I repeat, compliances that businesses have to undertake at an aggregate every year. These compliances change at the rate of around, I think, 2,000 per annum. 2,000 per quarter. They keep changing. With such a regulatory infrastructure, I don't know how wealth will come, but given the Prime Minister's direction and the actions that have preceded and are ongoing, I hope many of these things will change. Once we have this, when we think of a grand strategy, it cannot be thought of only in terms of engaging with the world. We have to engage with the rest of the world on their terms as well. We have to compete with them. In order to make that competition, in order to attract investments, to give you a small sliver of what I'm talking about, we need to ensure that people come, they are not harassed, there is no excessive bureaucracy, there is no corruption. For all of that, we need to rethink our domestic legislations. As far as the grand strategies go, these are also there is a changing chessboard. I think after Balakot, for instance, on the military side in Pakistan, India has certainly changed its stance, foreign policy stance, that we are not going to sit back and get killed anymore. If you act or you behave in a manner that that works with terrorists, for instance, I have harsher words which I will refrain from using in this public platform right now. But you will get it back at a compounded rate. With China, we have been able to do that as well. Do you think they're going to change? I doubt it. The signals of peace today are nice. They must be pursued, but I don't think it's going to change. So our grand strategy cannot just lean on what we wish from them. US, until the previous disposition, suppose we leaned on the US grand strategy as a direction, it would not serve us the same in the new administration. So our grand strategy, even when we engage with other nations, has to be flexible, has to be India first, as the rest of the strategies are, and we need to be very nimble-footed.
True. Manjit, your thoughts on any of these ideas that all of us have spoken about?
Yes, so I'm going to start with you, Nitin. I think that what you said about journalism is absolutely true. What we need and what we don't have is lots and lots of journalism schools. There are very few of them, and the way they teach is extremely old-fashioned. There was a new media school that was started a few years ago and had to be shut down in 2 years. I know because I was sort of associated with it. In 2 years, we started in Delhi because we couldn't get any other funding apart from government funding. So we need to start getting the private sector and to get involved. You know, Rupert Murdoch makes so much money in India. He has started a Murdoch University in Australia. There is no reason why he can't spend $10 million and start a journalism school. I mean, this helps everybody. It helps the quality of journalism, and it should be digital, up to date. There is no reason why they can't do it. And these should be not just in English. We need it in English, but most important, we need it in the regional languages. And there's plenty of help for this because everybody knows how important journalists are. And I think now with the digital companies being forced to pay the media for using their news, this will really help the media companies become, get a better financial base. So that is absolutely true, and we need to do that largely in second-tier cities and third-tier cities, right? Even Bangladesh has a very good model of photographers, creating photographers and little radio journalists in their rural areas. So the big rural news everywhere. So Ambassador Akbaruddin, even for positioning our people in areas where we have a large diaspora. You're absolutely right. It's not that difficult. We just need to be organized with it. Secondly, to talk to Ambassador Akbaruddin, the junior professional officers, India doesn't, I don't know, I don't even know whether we have so many of these officers in the UN. And so these are young officers that countries place in the UN when they're 25 years old and they stay with the system, but then they become embedded in the system. And China has done this very, very successfully. So even right now, China has, you're right, they plan ahead. And I think out of 40 UN agencies, China has people embedded in the top 10 in 22 of them. I mean, that is astonishing. India has only 12. And I know that India fights a valiant fight in the UN with very few people. We really always we do more with very little. And that is the India story, which is, a quest for the best for the least. But we really have to do better at that. And we need to start we need to teach our young people not just development in the UN. That's not what it is. Just now, and this, Ambassador, with the Belt and Road Initiative, China does $350 million in assessed contributions, which is what it has to give to the UN. But then it's more than $1 billion more in voluntary contributions. So the Bill Gates and Miller Foundation, I mean, they give money to the UN. It's tremendous amount of influence because the UN just doesn't have that money. So can our philanthropic institutions also start giving that kind of money so that we can have a say in what goes on globally? Or, Ambassador, does this need to change? And Gautam, I'll come back to you in the next round.
Yeah. Okay. So let me take up Gautam's idea about legislation and the compliances and thing. And you're absolutely right. I was speaking to some Taiwanese diplomats and some industries, and Taiwanese are very keen, for instance, to move out of China because they've had a long history of being in China in terms of manufacturing and the skills that they have. They want to move out. They want to come to India. And of course, there are other competing nations like Vietnam and maybe even Korea. But they know that the scale is much higher and much larger in India, so they want to come to India. But they run up against a wall in India about all these compliances and permissions and licenses that they need. And because these companies in Taiwan are all mostly SMEs, they find it very difficult, and they were looking for answers that what could one do here. So I think that change needs to come. Your idea about trying to ease of doing business to be in place needs to be really embedded, needs to spread across the states, and it's not the center alone that can do it. I mean, that's the other issue. If we have different legislations, different rules and regulations in different states, it's very difficult for them to understand if they're coming from outside. If we need investment, if we need people to come and set up facilities here, then it needs to be at least some uniformity in rules and laws and the kind of permissions that are needed. And that is how these people will go back and become the ambassadors for our narrative of how India is changing or has changed in terms of ease of doing business. But that is not happening. I think we need to do a little more on that count. That's the idea that I thought I will give. And just to give an example of how money plays a big part in narrative setting, the Chinese spend something like $6 billion in support of their media, the official media organs that they have, Xinhua, CGTN, and even the Global Times, which of course is a hound dog. But that's where they spend that money. And $10 billion on spreading soft power. India has a natural advantage of soft power through Bollywood, through our cultural outreach, at least in Southeast Asian countries and elsewhere. But we have not taken advantage of that head start that we've had before. So I think we need to relook at what we have, what kind of money we can spend, and why we should spend money. As Ambassador Akbaruddin said, if you have to have influence in the UN, then we also need to spend that money, because after all, whoever pays can call the shots or at least have a larger influence. I think that's where I think we need to change our narrative, because creating narratives, I completely agree with you, Ambassador Akbaruddin, that it's not an overnight job. It takes time, does not happen by accident. It needs planning. it needs a forethought or a kind of roadmap for the next 20 years. Are we prepared to do that? Are we even thinking of that? Is something that we must ask ourselves and the audience here. Because if India is going to rise, is rising, then India also needs to have concurrent instruments of giving that narrative to the world, or at least spreading that narrative to the world. I think I'll stop here, but again, we might have about last 5 minutes we have. So maybe
So,
last.
may I just interrupt
Yes.
here?
Yes,
I have a
please.
question for Manjeet as well as for Mr. Akbaruddin and you. Are we being so India has been distracted by wars, by terror, etc. Is narrative the new distraction? My question is not that why we should, you mentioned journalism, schools, Manjeet. Akbaruddinji mentioned that the narrative part, your entire presentation is on building new narratives and so on. And I'm just saying that, and this is refers to Akbaruddinji, if G2G engagements and G2C engagements, G2G means governments are generally very friendly with India. G2C means corporations are coming. In the last 1 year, we have seen the highest FDIs come into India. So if G2G and G2C engagements are positive, do we really need a narrative? Yeah, let some people squeal and scream and shout. Who cares? By the way, I'm a believer in narrative. I think we should have a positive narrative. But I'm just saying, for the sake of practical things and with the large amounts of investments and research, don't you think we would be better off, as Manjeet said, having more professionals in the UN, more officers there, rather than spending money on building narratives and trying to counter some false discussions, as we did yesterday in the human rights conference?
So a couple of quick responses to several interesting issues. First, let me try and respond to Dr. Kriplani. One, I agree that we may have to have an international organization based in India, but I don't agree that we should dump the International Solar Alliance. It's like throwing the baby with the bathwater. Let me give you why. Very quick reasons. Climate change is going to be a major issue. Energy and renewable energy is going to be a major issue, both domestically and globally. We are well positioned in that, both in terms of facts on the ground, data, because we've increased our renewables multifold, but also in terms of the narrative. Yes, I acknowledge that it's not been functioning like an international organization, but we need to rectify that. Instead of throwing that, somebody else will appropriate it. This is an opportunity to build on it, rectify its errors, and then proceed forward. Let's not give up that asset that we have. True, it's not worked out well. Again, I said I'll be the first to acknowledge that it has many shortcomings, but it's a glamorous asset. It's an underutilized asset. We need to build on it. That's number one. Number two is about this whole concept of whether narrative is or not important. My view is that investment across the board is important. And it's not a choice that we have. It's a necessity across the board, because it will, in the longer term, reduce your investments in other things. Narrative does make it easier to reap rewards. It's like a beauty queen. A beauty queen and a muscular wrestler. The beauty queen wins the votes all the time. So let's try, even if we become a muscular wrestler, we need to try to have some aspects of the beauty queen. So let's not discard narrative totally. It's an important aspect. May or may not be the most important, but beauty queens win beauty contests. So let's not discard them. I'll leave it at that because we're running out of time.
We're running out of time. We've got last 1 minute. So I'll urge you, Mr. Akbaruddin, to sort of wind up your remarks, and then maybe I'll just make one half a minute intervention here.
No, I will not take my time further. I yield to you.
Okay, I'll just say we are speaking today on the second anniversary of the air attack from Pakistan on 27th February 2019 following the Balakot airstrike. Just look at the two competing narratives or two contrasting narratives on 26th of February 2019 when India went and attacked Balakot camp of Jaish-e-Mohammed. What happened that day and what happened on 27th of February 2019. Two contrasting. India won the war of narratives on the first day, lost the war of narratives on the second day. Important to direct all that. But I'm not going to waste time on that. But Manjeet, if you have you got 30 seconds to make your final remarks, and then maybe Gautam can have the last word.
Okay, so Gautam, this is to your points. I think that India's private sector needs to do a lot more. It needs to put its shoulder to the wheel now. They did it when, after year 2000, when Indian software was on the rise. These very same Indian software companies that have so much trust in the world, they're plugged into the guts of global corporations and they're highly trusted, but they are not doing enough to take India's narrative forward. They're just not doing. They're happy earning money, purchase by purchase. It used to be $25 for 25% returns. Now it's less, but they're still not doing more. We need corporate India to put its shoulder to the wheel and tell the story of India like they used to, because they carry weight and they have credibility.
Great. Gautam, last word to you when we wind up here.
Yeah, so I don't want to make any concluding remark, but I'll just answer your query of that India won the action war, but lost the narrative war. I think hard power comes before soft power. So as we are entering which is what's my point to Mr. Akbaruddin as well. So in a G to G or M to M, military to military, if India is winning that narrative or that war, crafting a narrative is the easy part. Manjeet says that private sector needs to come and craft that narrative. But whenever the corporate people get into media, the allegations are independent media is being smothered. So I think as India, as a larger citizenry, we need to decide, are corporates good or bad? Thankfully, Modi has said they are good. So let's move with that. I agree with you, Manjeet. I agree with you. It's just that I'm not certain if the action.
Thank you all for joining, and thank you for this opportunity.
Thank you.
Data Reveals Tathya 2021. Do keep watching, and thanks for being here.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Oh my God, that was quite something. I felt so proud of India as a nation listening to these bright minds. With this kind of a focus, we are on a path of becoming Vishwaguru. If you agree with me, tweet, coo, and post using the hashtag Tathya2021 and tell the speakers what you liked from their discussion. Well, we now have a surprise, a special announcement. Banasthali Vidyapeeth is the largest fully residential women university in the world. For the narrative that India is a patriarchal society that suppresses women, Banasthali has been providing education exclusively for women for almost a century. I would like to play a special announcement from Dr. Harsh Purohit, Dean from Banasthali.
Banasthali Vidyapeeth, an institution deemed to be university located in village Banasthali, about 70 kilometers from Pink City, Jaipur, is a spontaneous creation. Pandit Hiralal Shastri, freedom fighter and a close ally of Sardar Vallabhbhai Patel, along with Srimati Ratan Shastri, Padma Bhushan, lost their daughter Shantabai at the tender age of 12 years and decided to train others' daughters in the very same way they would have trained their own daughter.
Banasthali Vidyapeeth, the largest fully residential women's university in the world, nurturing leaders in all the walks of life. A legacy of 80 years. Banasthali Vidyapeeth, university for women, university with a difference.
Acknowledging that Data Reveals is carrying an important task for enhancing pride about India by validating media narratives through empirical data, Banasthali would like to associate with Data Reveals, involving its students and the staff at Faculty of Management and Law, and play its part in ensuring that India is recognized for its uniqueness. Thank you very much.
Now on to our final panel, friends. This Power Pack panel will discuss new age governance, deploying today's tools for a better tomorrow. Joining us for this panel are Padma Awardee Mohandas Paiji, a man who wears too many hats to count, and a guiding light and advisor to data reveals. We have Monica Halanji, best-selling author of Let's Talk Money and expert on finance and economics. Shamika Raviji, economist and non-resident senior fellow, Brookings Institution, and most recently known for her work on COVID numbers. Also, we have Sashank Bavarajuji, board advisor with Data Reveals and has been leading the extraordinary program with Rashram School on bursting myths through data analysis. Let's welcome this panel.
Folks, welcome to this talk. I think it's exciting to have all of you. Namaskar to all of you. Let me start by talking to Shamika. Shamika, during the COVID times, there were many challenges on this country, and especially in governance, and people criticized the government for not, doing things on time, blah, blah, blah. But you are the one person who was looking at data for India and globally. And based upon your data analysis and what you've done, how do you rate India's performance? Do you think the government's focus on data, government's focus on strategy for COVID really worked based on the analysis that you have done? Do you think they did things right?
Oh, Mohan, thank you. Given our given that preemptively, I think very pragmatically, knowing that our health infrastructure would never be able to accommodate a deluge, I think the early steps really helped in containing the spread. As a result of which, of course, we do note that is also like talking about the entire continent of Europe. While Western Europe has really done well, Eastern Europe is really in flames in some sense. So in the Indian context, means overall we've had huge
Shamika, 1 minute. Will others please go on mute so that there's no echo? Please go on mute. Only Shamika will speak.
Yeah. So given what a large country we are, the national level strategy in the beginning, Mohan, I think were very, very preemptive and much needed. We got a lot of beating in the beginning, being told what a stringent lockdown and how India had essentially throttled its economy and so on. But you have to view this as the opportunity cost of life. And given how our public health infrastructure in many parts of the country, I think it was the right decision at the time. Subsequently, the way testing was ramped up. Now, you have to remember that you are making up for decades of lack of creating this infrastructure. And within, I think, 6 months, every state had ICMR approved testing labs with required supply chain where they were all linked with Delhi. So the data, while we can talk about how much more we could have done at patient level, because we are constantly comparing ourselves with Germany, OECD, etc., I would say you have to be realistic in terms of what our infrastructure was. And based on that, I would rate India very high. Now, again, remember, even at our height, or you can say the peak, some states were clearly way behind the curve. Major state like Maharashtra, if it is testing with a test positivity rate of 20%, meaning of every 120 are coming positive, when the required benchmark is 5%, that also leaves a lot to want, because eventually health is a state subject. So it also made us acutely aware that in a federal structure like ours, states also have to play along. So you have to just take an overall flavor of this huge country with a lot of state level variations. But on the whole, we have done very well. Of course, remember, our numbers have again started to go up. 9 states are showing increase, but hopefully it will not be the kind of second wave that Europe and America, etc., have had.
Shamika, let me take this question forward again. If you are the health minister of this country, based on all the data that you have analyzed, based on what you are seeing right from the time, because I remember, you were the 1% was really getting into details. How would you use all this data, this study, to evolve a health policy for this country? Because we're talking about new age governance. It implies that new age governance is based on data, is based on reality, is based on up-to-date information. And you have got all of this. You have seen the weaknesses and strength of the federal structure. You've seen some states do well, some states not do well. If you're the health minister, you had a carte blanche to rewrite the policy for the country. What are the things you would address?
So first, Mohan, I think our biggest gap remains data. Remember, we are still analyzing Johns Hopkins data. Right? Our testing data is coming from Apex Institution, ICMR, but a lot of the aggregation is being done by volunteers. And that is the beauty of this country, that I think in many ways, people, ordinary researchers across the country have helped aggregate this data and put it across. And of course, institutions have cleaned it and made it available for people like us to then use. So number one, I would seriously make investment in data. And I think this is where if I were to say one big idea, Mohan, this is the time we have to invest in a civil registration of vital statistics, meaning we need a CRVS system in this country. It takes us 10 years to finally recognize or understand, because across census, we don't know how urban we are. So we are always using proxy metrics, night lights data, density data, because I do that for a living. And I think proxies are good, but it's not the actual measure. So that's number one. We need real-time census linked to metrics like Aadhaar, where we know that what is the demographic transition. So that a lot of the conversation which is happening in a vacuum today, Hindu population growth, Muslim population growth, how many states over the last 25 years have become Muslim, Christian majority states, for instance. It affects the nature of, not just politics, but larger public policy discussions, which right now are full of conjectures, because 12, 13 years of not having updated census data, and health is a very large part of it, but there are many other aspects as well. In a young, dynamic country like India, 10, 12 years is a very long period of time. So I would seriously invest in a major CRVS overhaul and link it to something like Aadhaar, so that real-time information is available. And the second, which I think people discount, is communication. We have to communicate with the citizens better. If you have, and I think that was frankly the professional call that some of us took, because we were all scared. We were all worried that what is this, the way it was expanding in Europe and Japan and all, we were thinking this deluge will never survive. Schools were shutting down. People were scared. We were getting calls from cancer patients saying, will we ever get chemo, etc., because hospitals are shutting down. Under that kind of a fear and uncertainty, I think the biggest investment is communication. Talk to people. Tell them exactly, look, projections, models, many were wrong. But real time, what we were looking at is the past 7 days data and saying, this is the way we are moving. And I think that allayed fears. The sense that we were growing, but we were growing at a rate where we could manage. Some cities were hotspot occasionally, but then certain other cities were only growing. Some were getting better at the same time. So I think that overall information helps. Some people think financing is our biggest constraint in healthcare. You will hear this all the time, that India spends very little on health. Now, it is true that we spend less on health, but you will be surprised how many states in India are sitting with unspent budget in healthcare, which means it is not a simple fix like allocation of money. It is also a government capacity issue, because in a lot of our states, the chief medical officer, who is, by the way, supposed to be as powerful as the DM or the superintendent of police, the chief medical officer is really much lower in the hierarchy of power and resources. Now, you have to correct for a lot of those distortions. Money is not our biggest concern right now. So I think I would use this pandemic, Mohan, to really make healthcare the center focus, the cornerstone of Indian economy. Also from a strategic perspective, remember the world is aging. Everybody is looking for ways to reduce health costs. And they're all looking at, countries like India, young country. So we have people, nurses, doctors. We also have health IT support. So of course, the vaccination, pharmaceutical, generics, that story. So India is poised to make healthcare the engine of growth for the next 50 years for the global economy. And I think that has to be the longer term agenda for health, not just taking care of our own needs, but also as a growth engine.
Shamika, a very, very quick answer now. Did policymakers use all your data analytics, talk to you about what is happening to get deep insights into what to do?
Yes, they did, Mohan. I must confess, people were getting the same information that our senior most policymakers were getting, at least from my table. But I must tell you that there was a lot more information available. We could have done better communication.
Okay. That's great. That's great. I think, you're giving us great hope that, things could work with civil society coming together. Now, Monica, very interesting questions come up in your area of your expertise, financial services, the financial sector. Do you think our policymakers are using latest data? Do they have latest data? I'll give you one small instance. Our CPI data is based upon 2011-12 weights, where food is 46%. GDP has gone up maybe twice from that time. Per capita income has gone up nearly twice. But do you think our policymakers, while making policy in this area, in the finance area, are using up-to-date data?
And that, Mohan, is one of the key issues of one is the use of data, and the second is the DNA of data, which is what I actually want to begin with to say that yes, data is very important, but there is also a DNA of data. And I will just take a small example. And this has been a bugbear with me. It's been a controversial story, which is to say that India imports a lot of gold because Indian households, because of the entire financial sector, mistrust issues, invest in gold traditionally because the financial sector was not evolved. We account for gold on the current account, and we have a current account deficit, which has been a bugbear with us for a long time. But we tax gold globally as a capital asset. So we pay a capital gains tax on it domestically. Even the Basel III norms have a markdown, but it is still a capital asset. So it isn't. So if every time I have asked why is gold on my current account, on my balance sheet of the country, I'm told these are global norms. Now, who makes the global norms? Obviously, it is not us. So yes, data is very important, but if we are looking at a major thought of a national data initiative, we should remember to embed it with the Indian story, with the Indian narrative very strongly. And that will then feed into the collection of data and, of course, the dissemination. So that becomes really key. And, there was one big thought in terms of how data should actually inform policy. And, what I have seen over the years is that there is a certain attempt by the bureaucrats to imagine that they know what is good for markets. And since my work has been with financial markets, with regulators, with the government, I have seen upfront, and I'll give you one example. 2012, there was a scheme called Rajiv Gandhi Equity Savings Scheme, which is a stock market scheme designed by a bureaucrat. Who obviously these people sit on defined benefit pensions. They have no idea of how either stock markets work or how individual investors think. The scheme, of course, was a non-starter. The only reason it came into the budget was because of the name of the scheme, which is Rajiv Gandhi. Right? 2018, there were no subscribers and the scheme was let go. So should there have been a data-based understanding of what really works, and why is it that a gold investor will not go to a stock market not because you're going to give him a harebrained scheme, but because of a whole variety of access, trust issues. So, had data been used in this construction, we may have led to a very different space. So, absolutely, data has to inform policy.
Monica, this leads to another point which I think you can elucidate to us, and that is we are seeing an explosion of data coming in the financial sector. There are many startup fintech companies. UPI is there. UPI released the data, etc. There's a lot of information about tax collection, tax estimate. A lot of economists are writing articles about GDP growth, blah blah blah. So much is happening everywhere. Now tell me, in the budget making or in policy, national policy, GDP, national policy for growth, do you think government is using enough data, up-to-date data, to ensure that the policy is based upon what is required at this point of time? You give an example about a scheme, but on a broad level for economic growth, with all this new data over the last 2 years, please remember, I'm only talking about the last 2 years. Do you think a renewed move to collect all the data and use it? Do you think analysts are writing about it? Do you think financial journalists are writing about it? Do you think there is a new move to do all this?
Right. So, one is that now there is access to big data. And I would imagine that even the government is scrambling to understand how to use this big data. It's a new animal. For example, when the demonetization happened, we all had thought that that would lead to uh, people with cash either having to destroy it, but we found it all got channeled to the banking sector. And then we can ask, why is it that those who managed to convert black into white through banking are not being targeted and sent notices? There's a capacity constraint within the government also to understand how to join all the dots that this data exhausts. We're all throwing off giant exhausts of data, and parts of the system are beginning to use this data. But I think when the government begins to use this data, there are immediately issues of privacy and how far you can go. And of course, the privacy of data is a very important thing. However, I think it is still early days where the government is not fully equipped to actually use the data to bring out the full story of what is really going on. The data is available, it is a capacity, and I am not saying that the capacity is not being enhanced or that there is no view to this being enhanced. It is only a matter of time that the entire narrative, the digital exhaust that we throw out, and again, I will give you an example out of a regulator that I have worked with closely, which is SEBI. I've been part of their committee for 10 years. There is a move to use social media footprints to track insider trading, and insider trading remains one of the most difficult things to catch because of a variety of issues. I don't want to go into that, but they are actually looking at the social media footprints to establish relationships between two possibly unrelated parties. So there are parts of the system in which data is being harnessed, used. There is still some time in connecting the dots, but when we are able to do it, we are looking at and hoping that the privacy law is in place by the time, and all the global majors have to agree with those privacy norms because we're in India. Then we're looking at a very different story about the Indian economy, because uh, it is not being captured fully. What is happening on the ground is not being captured fully today with the kind of data mindset that we still have. And I said it is the DNA of data which will have to change.
Monica, one very quick question. We see on social media people like Kaushik Basu, I want to give names, the former chief economic advisor, Raghuram Rajan, talking about the global economy and some aspects. For example, trust in FDI. If you have this kind of politics in India, you will not get FDI, but we're having an explosion of FDI. Now tell me, people who make investment decisions, what kind of data do they have? Enough data to make investment decisions versus for India when they come to India versus some of these old style economists Not like Shamika, who works with data and she knows how to get the data. Some of these old style economists who have made a living and grown up using narratives.
I think in the previous panel, there was a comment which said that the G2G and the G2C conversations are happening irrespective of narratives. And I think it's a really powerful point that, your comment proves your point that look at the stock markets, look at where they're going, and look at the FDI into India. The only thing stopping FDI is not the narrative about India. It is about our bureaucracy. It's about the difficulty of doing business in India. Money doesn't care about the narrative which is constructed. A lot of the lies are caught. A lot of the political posturings are caught. And frankly, understanding money very deeply, it's looking for a return. And if in a largest democracy with institutions which work, the money will be more than happy to come and is going to completely ignore the narrative. We just have to clean our house and welcome the Lakshmi home.
Well, that's interesting. Shamika, before I go to Shashank has been waiting for some time. Money does not care about lies. Money cares about data and returns. Now, Shamika, what is the role of economists in understanding money and understanding economy? Do you think economists now, with the explosion of data, should reorient their work not on narratives but on data-based narratives?
100%, Mohan. I mean, look, there is data. Data is like oil, and you've heard this cliche everywhere.
Yeah.
But to transform oil or data into information or something useful requires data analytics, requires the data scientists. And I think that is one investment which we are yet to make. I think the private sector is doing phenomenal work in R&D. But I think from the government side, there is a sense of lethargy. There is the old way of doing business. Research, unfortunately, doesn't adhere to a lot of the old feudal structure or the hierarchy. So I think that investment needs to be made, and narrative comes out of that. In fact, if any of you have followed my Twitter account, the only reason I got on Twitter, Mohan, and remember it, I still tweet relatively less, but I put data out. I think the best way to build a narrative, or frankly break a narrative, because some narratives are absolutely vicious and sometimes they're totally hollow, is to put out a statistics. Now, with of course all the caveats, etc. And I think that speaks 1,000 words rather than we having to just say things repeatedly. No, data is a source of immense power, Mohan. We just have to know how to use it appropriately. But I want to make a small point. Is the government using enough? Now, think of something like National Health Mission. We have had it for 15 years now. We have just extended it again. Ideally, we should do an impact assessment. We should know exactly what aspect of it is working and what is not working. So day-to-day governance requires us to have this kind of an updated knowledge on huge schemes, how to change them, how to make them more efficient, effective. And I think that we still have some way to go.
Thank you. And Shashank, you are the data generation. You are the cutting edge. You are the person who understands data well, because I think you've grown up on data, use data in your day-to-day work. Now, you have been one of the founders of Data Reveals, and have been trying to use data to fight the kind of narratives that many people are trying to get to talk about India. Can you tell us how this has worked, and what are the things that we should do to put data first so that people can talk about India based on data?
Sure, Mohan sir. Thank you so much. And while I was waiting, I was actually enjoying my wait as I was listening to Shamika ji and Monica ji. And to your questions, as Mohanji, as we were doing analysis and we're trying to put data together and analytics together, the struggle has been finding data. And while that is true, I think it would have been a harder challenge 10 years back compared to now. We now have the Indian data statistics site live since 2012. There is a global index, which is Global Open Data Index, which rates how well countries share data. And it's heartening to know that India is currently ranked 32 out of the 94 countries that are ranked, which is in the top, puts us top 1/3. Amazing. Having said that, we found a lot of data. We were able to put some analytics together, but still some key data that's missing. Amongst the data that's available, and I'd like to call this out, one of the key pieces of information which I think is missing is about land ownership. An interesting piece of data again is that 66% of our civil cases today are related to land ownership.
Oh.
What would happen if this data is made available to public? What if this data is made available for people, not just for analytics, and I'm talking about governance, I'm talking about how our day-to-day living gets impacted. Even ease of business gets impacted if the data of land ownership is made available. The number of cases would come down drastically. There'd be a huge increase in the ease of using business. The stress on the judiciary system would come down. And we all know today that if in an economy, if in a democracy, if we need the agencies, the government agencies to work well, we need the judiciary to support. And putting data together is going to support the whole ecosystem as a whole. So we've seen this case. We've seen about Smriti Irani ji during her address talk about how pushing for data has made them realize that the number of children who need nutrition is not 8 million as initially estimated, but actually 1 million. Imagine using data. Yes, sir. And using data, if it's helped ensure that the right level of nutrition is going to the right level of right children, that's the best that can happen. Another small anecdote that I can give is that there is an OOS ratio, which is the out of school ratio. There's a case where India was featuring on fairly quite poor when it came to number of the girl children who were passing out of senior education. Monica ji, Shamika ji, this may be of interest to you, being women yourselves, that India was doing bad. A lot of girl children were not attending schools and not graduating from senior school and tertiary education was becoming an issue. Data was sitting there. A little bit of analysis was required to be done, was done. And guess what the revelation was? The schools where toilets were not present for girls, the dropout rate was 3x than in schools where there were facilities for children of that age, girl children of that age. I mean, if I read it, I feel so terrible that our own children, girl children, are having tough time. But looking at data, we've been able to fix the education system. Looking at data, we've been able to ensure that we get nutrition to the right people. Continue to look at data, continue to keep data available for people, help us in judiciary. I can see data being made regularly available and used only benefiting the country. More data-backed solutions, data-backed suggestions would be made, and that's going to be fascinating. And I'm so excited with the ideas that Shamika ji gave about real-time digital census. I cannot say if I've heard something more important and relevant at this point in time.
Shashank, another question that comes up very well. What is the role of people like Shamika, Monica, you, and Anurag, and everybody else in an environment where there's a lot of narrative and government is desperate looking for data? And like Monica and Shamika both said, government, there is a DNA challenge, and there's a lack of understanding about where to get data, what to do with data. So what should people like us do to make sure that government takes policy decisions based on data, and the narratives that we hear in our media is also based on data?
Great question, Mohanji. I would say a couple of things. One is the questions that people ask back to the government, if they are data backed, then the answers cannot not include data in them. So empowering people. Democracy is all about getting people the ability to ask the right question. The government servants, the public servants are answerable to people. And if the question includes data, the answers will include data. The role that all of us can do, if I could just expand on that, I also would like to say that we generally have a spectrum. We have people right from people who don't understand that their narratives being played. There are people who understand narratives are being played but don't know what to do. There are people who understand that narratives are being played, data is available, and data is the right way to respond. I think we have to educate and support people in the whole spectrum. Data Reveals is a public utility platform which hopefully addresses number 3, but all of us together, including other influencers, need to let people understand that narratives are being played, and we need to respond. And that is something that all of us can do and something that we should continue to do.
Okay, folks, we have to come to the end of this discussion, but one closing comment. Shamika, Monica, then Shashank, your closing comments on new age governance and data. What should the way forward?
Well, we can't wait for bureaucracy to develop and evolve and demand such services, Mohan. So I will go back to one of the old fundamental laws of economics. I mean, we say this is the Say's law. Supply will create its own demand. We just have to continue doing good, high quality data analysis and publishing. And I think eventually bureaucracy is one part of the larger public that uses it, but I think it's good for the nation as a whole.
Monica?
Big data is going to be extremely empowering both to the governed and to the governor. So for the government and the citizen, both, it will be hugely empowering. My only prayer is we should get the DNA of our own data exhausts right.
Shashank?
Mohanji, my concluding thought would be, in addition to all the thoughts we've said, is the talent exists in India. The technology is ready today to be able to support blockchains. And the amount of engineers we have in India is, data scientists that we have in India is amazing. It's high time that we tap into the potential and the talent available. We are solving problems for a lot of other countries. We can do it for us as well. We should do it, and we should tap into this. With that, I can only see a very bright future for us, and I'm very excited about what is in store for us.
Folks, I want to bring this to an end. There's an extraordinary conversation between three very brilliant people who have worked with data and who have shown policymakers what to do. Professor Shamika Ravi has been truly extraordinary in the COVID times, of course, all the time, but what she has written has given great hope for the people of this country, and her impact has been tremendous, and I think is extraordinary. Monica has been working on the financial sector, and her talk and her points about the use of data in policy and how it is happening is very, very heartening. And of course, Shashank is the digital generation working in the digital companies, and I think his views and how optimistic he is and what could happen with the proper use of data. And I think I'll just end by saying all of us jointly must start producing case studies to show how data and the use of data can make better policy, so that we can send it to our policymakers, our political leaders, so that they also understand that we need up-to-date data so that India can be better. So thank you very much for this conversation. I want to thank all the three extraordinary people for their point. Thank you very much. Over to the organizers.
Thank you.
Okay, so I don't know about you all, but my mind is buzzing. I especially like the new pieces of information that I didn't know about. Do tweet and post and tell us which facts and number were surprises for you. Do not forget to tag Mohanji, Shamikaji, Monikaji, and Shashankji. And remember, hashtag Tathya 2021. Now that we are done with the main course, it's time for the dessert. We are honored to have with us Honorable Suresh Prabhuji to deliver the convocation address. And now I request Mohan Dasji and Anuragji to please welcome Suresh Prabhuji. Over to you, Anuragji.
Namaskar, everyone. Can we get Suresh ji up on the screen as well? Now, Namaskar, Suresh ji. Now, just before we welcome you, predictably it falls on three chartered accountants to talk about data. But on a serious note, I think there are deeper cultural issues we are trying to resolve here. I was having a discussion with my friend yesterday on how we Desis are terrible at both giving compliments and receiving compliments. And when the world paints us in a bad light, we just live by it, because filmon mein kaha jata hai ki no sorry, no thank you. Now, data reveals is a way to assess what we should be complimenting ourselves about. We are very, very proud to associate with the Rashtam School for Public Leadership, with the Rishihud University, which you lead, sir, We're very proud they take a civilizational view. Shobit ji, Sahil ji have become friends over time, which I'm very glad for. I leave it to Mohandas ji to, both of you are educators now. So I leave it to Mohandas ji to talk about data reveals, but just a quick summary of the program with Rashtam. We had over 200 applicants from 6 different countries. The diversity was amazing. We had undergrad students, PhDs who are on their postdoctoral journeys. We had retired teachers and professors that had joined the program. And finally, we are graduating 58 is just the beginning of a journey where we all collectively set the narrative. With that, over to Mohandas ji to make a quick couple of opening comments and then invite Suresh ji to deliver the convocation address.
Folks, we are very lucky to have Minister Suresh Prabhu come and deliver this convocation address. I have great admiration and respect for Minister Suresh Prabhu for many things. First of all, he walks the talks. He is a man of extraordinary high principles, a man of extraordinary ability, very high intellect, a great communicator, an innovator, and a person who comes out with lateral thoughts. Every time you talk to him, you come out refreshed, full of hope for the country, full of hope for the future. His passion for speech, his passion in convincing you, in putting points across is unbelievable. You come back with new energy and new hope. I will call him the Minister for Hope for India. I think every young person in this country should listen to Minister Prabhu to understand the future of this country. Yes, we are all been born in poor circumstances. We have seen a very poor India, but we've seen extraordinary growth. We've seen the rise of a new India. And this new India has been built by people like Mr. Suresh Prabhu, who were people in the economic area trying to improve the economic might, but he gave it up for public service. He has served as a minister in the Vajpayee government, and he has done some extraordinary work. He's right now the Sherpa for the Global 20. And during his long career, both in business and in public service, he has been a beacon of hope for us and always positive. Because in this country, you always come with negative narrative. There's a group of people in Lutyens, Delhi, I want to name them, who are experts in negative narratives. India is a $3 trillion economy, will be a $5 trillion economy. Can you imagine who gave that 5 million target? Minister Suresh Prabhu. When he was the commerce minister, he was the one who worked on it. He is the one who gave the model. He is the one who told us we can do it. And nobody believed that. And now we're going to make it. And he's going to be there to make sure that we make it. And Suresh Mam, I'm going to tell you, you must give us a new target of $10 trillion by 2031, 2030. And we'll make it happen, Suresh Mam. It will happen. Because, the young people of this country are rising up. They want to make this new India. We got a great leadership in Delhi. You are there, and they will make it happen. And this whole convocation is about, getting a group of young people together who believe in data, who believe in the new idea of India. You believe in the India, which is Ram Raja for everybody, and who will make that India happen. And your role, Suresh Mam, is to make sure that they stay inspired, and you make sure they work very hard, 24/7, and you make sure they build the new India for all the tips. Thank you very much. And over to Mr. Suresh Prabhu.
So thank you, my dear friend. And you can make out from the way he was describing me, he's my real long-time good friend. And so is Anurag, my another dear friend. So thank you very much for, firstly, organizing this extremely important event. I must congratulate Rashtam, as the name itself indicates, and the nomenclature encompasses the entire vision of the Rashtam School of Governance. We talk about government and governance, but both government and governance have to have some relationship with a much wider body, wider issue. What is that institution of which you are a government, or what is that government of a particular entity that you are trying to deliver through governance? So both have to have relationship with Rashtra, the nation. If there is no nation, if there is a lawlessness, there is no institution. Obviously, there is no government. There can be landmass which people can claim to be theirs, but anybody can claim that, anybody can reclaim that, anybody can fight for it because there is no government, there is no governance. So Rashtra is actually trying to provide us guidance, relevance to this whole concept of what we should stand for. Because when we start discussing government and governance, we tend to forget what is it related to. And therefore, I must congratulate and thank Rashtam School for organizing this event. I'm very happy that this is housed in Vishnu University, a university which is actually also stands for values, for certain principles, certain ideals, and a much loftier mission. I hope all of us will be able to work together to accomplish this loftier mission to achieve a much, much stronger, better, healthier, and happier for people who are living in it. So let me congratulate them to begin with. I'm very happy that a very distinguished panel just spoke about various issues related to data and its allied issues. First, let me qualify my statement and disclose that the government is trying to prepare a law, a bill has been drafted for data protection, data privacy of data, and all of that. I am on the Joint Parliamentary Committee, which was appointed to look into this entire proposed legislation. So therefore, I want to disclose that I am part of it. So I'm not going to tell you anything about what is there in the bill because that is still under examination by the Joint Parliamentary Committee. But let me also stress the importance of data because now everything is revolving around it. The digital economy and digital way of living has become a reality. It's only going to intensify, going to multiply, and no one can stop it. I always tell this to my friends that technology, penetration of it, once it is discovered somewhere, it is impossible you can stop it from entering your own home, your own life, your own society, your own country. It is like saying, I'm going to close my doors, close my windows so that air will not enter my house. It is as difficult as that to say that I will not allow technology penetration in my country. And one of the key drivers, the platform on which any future technology will develop are also digital platforms. Any new emerging technologies, somewhere down the line, they have relationship with digital technology. And a digital life in which inevitably will be creating, producing, generating a huge data. It's a footprint that we leave. On my other real good interest, and I will do by it, is a challenge the world is facing on climate change. There we always say that carbon footprints happen because of human life. Every time you travel by whatever mode, you leave some carbon footprint. Every time you have manifestation of your lifestyle, you leave some carbon footprint. But same way, we also leave a data footprint somewhere down the line in the digital economy. And the digital economy, there's impossible that one can opt out of it, can live out of it, and can say nothing to do with it, including the most secluded countries in the world. Maybe North Korea cannot even say that we don't generate data. They will actually, in fact, there is allegation. I don't know how far it is true for any country can make allegation, but some countries make allegation against other countries that you are trying to make cyber attacks on my system. For what? For stealing data, information. So data is something which you leave behind. The way you live your life automatically generates. It's a co-generation. And that co-generation is posing some challenges. Firstly, the corporate sector, the technology providers, the innovators, because of them, this whole possibilities of data has existed. It has been there because of this. They developed some technology. If there's no technology, we would not be discussing today about data at all. So the creators of this technology must be first commended, because we live by that system. We accepted it, we embraced it. So we must acknowledge it, we must commend it also. So on one side, we have to thank them, and other side, we have to worry about it. We thank them for having created something like this, which is now becoming an integral part of our life. At the same time, it is also creating some serious issues and challenges. And one of that is privacy. I was saying earlier that the concept of Rashtra is a much bigger issue. But a kind of Rashtra that we all envision, we want to live in it, is wherein there will be respect for each and every citizen in that Rashtra. A human being makes Rashtra. And Rashtra becomes a much bigger and higher plane. But that doesn't mean that individuals will not be respected or will not be cared for in that Rashtra. The main important part of that is respecting the citizen's right to have a privacy. Anybody can say that I don't want to reveal, and this is the data reveals program, something which I feel is very important. Now, what every person feels important, it will differ from person to person. Now, there is always a trade-off that how much of individual freedom of deciding what I should reveal and what should not, and how much of a national interest, the Rashtra's interest, should prevail over it. It's always a trade-off. That you give so much of freedom that maybe the long overall objective of Rashtra gets compromised. But if you don't give any freedom, and if you don't allow a citizen to decide how much I should reveal, the whole purpose of Rashtra is get defeated. So we have to have a very fine-tuned balance between the two, ensuring that larger national interest, Rashtra's interest prevails without compromising with individuals' right of privacy. And therefore, this particular data protection bill I talked about, we start to focus on this aspect. To what extent the fundamental right of a citizen to have privacy should be ceded in favor of a larger national interest. We have to have that very important compromise. But coming back to the point, that this new technology development is posing challenges. And one of them, as I said, is about privacy. technology is always welcome because that brings in new ideas, innovation. That's how the human mind always works. It is never static, always dynamic, tries to think about new things. And all human beings always strive for something new in their life. Not necessarily good or bad, but something different, something new. And that is what even nature is like that. Nature is full of diversity, biodiversity, different colors, different plants, different species. So human beings always will like to have new things, different things, and therefore technology will always keep evolving, keep changing, keep developing. So we must welcome it. But while we do this, we should always keep in mind that technology welcome, but its ill effects need to be regulated, particularly the ethical side of it. And I'm not saying only in terms of digital technologies related to we generate data or other. Of course, all will generate data. In any case, what you call data is a different matter, but something will always get generated. But ethical side of technological development is very important. Whether even in artificial intelligence. While we welcome it, how do you ensure that technologies will adhere to certain ethical standards? The challenge in these ethical standards is ethics is a very relative term. In different societies, at different times, the same society at different times will think about ethical issues differently. So, but while it is true, and I'm not getting into that, it's a long debate, but let us look at how to ensure ethical side of technological development is very important. So even in Data Reveals, the program that we organized today, one of the principal driving force and thinking going beyond data is would be, while data will come, data has to come, data will be generated and in huge quantity. You cannot even imagine the kind of data that is being generated even without a knowledge, without my consent. But while we all do all this, how do you ensure that ethical side of it is guaranteed? The individual's right of protection is properly taken care of. It's a very important thing that we must always keep in mind. Other side of it is related to individual and society is one side. Individual and nation, Rashtra, is another relationship which has to be seen from the eyes of data. Individual and society, forget government. Can my neighbor have a right to know everything about me? The government is not involved. But it is only between me and my rest of my neighborhood, my society in which I live. How much they should know about me, what I should be knowing, how much data they should access to. Many issues like that will also come in. Not necessarily because of data, but now data is bringing those issues to fore more prominently than before. So relationship of individual with society, relationship of individual with government, relationship of society collectively with the government are all important issues which are now creating different kind of narratives and debates in the country. All countries in the world. It's not only India. In fact, European Union passed a law on data privacy some years ago. But there's another new interesting debate that is emerging is about media. Earlier, the media was, you want to know something, then you have to wait. In fact, there's a very interesting story. Mahatma Gandhi was sick. And the only way people could know about his health was through radio. Not many radio was available. So I was elected 4 times Lok Sabha from Konkan. So there was one radio available in a place called Kankauli. So people will walk maybe 40, 100 miles, 50, 40, 50, just come there from a post office there, so therefore they could know. Go back, asking only, how is he Gandhiji now? Oh, he's okay, fine. Then he'll go back and then he'll give that news to somebody. That's the only source of dissemination of information through media. Then newspapers and then now TV. But even then, it was now breaking news has become a new norm. I don't know whose heads, whose soul, whose bodies, whose mind get broken. But even more, so breaking news has changed completely because we get it instantly. True or false is a different thing. I think that is what another issue that we need to discuss. Maybe in 1 minute I'll talk about it. But from radio, television, newspapers to all this now come new form of social media, in which the journalist who had the exclusive ability to communicate news, now everybody has become a journalist. We call them citizen journalists, whatever. But now every person in the world can give his opinion, his news on social media. It's a very good thing. It's a thought of expression which comes to fore. And why only few people must have the exclusive ability to give information, give news? It's like always I keep saying that when I was growing up, I was in school, somebody said he's a thinker. I said, what is thinker? Every person, even a laborer, is a thinker. Unfortunately, doesn't get time to think as much as the so-called thinkers get because he has to put labor to earn money, where the thinker can think and make money. But every person is a thinker. The same way, every person must have the ability to information. So there's nothing wrong with that. But that has posed another issue. How do you ensure that this information does not damage somebody else? A false narratives get created. So how to validate any information, any news, anything that gets into public domain, how can you validate it? So data can provide answer to this. This is something which we should try to think about seriously, and data reveals is something which can focus on it in a great deal. I feel we must use our ability or knowledge or technologies to also create, as my dear friend Mohandas ji said, but some positivity in society. I'm not saying positivity for government, positivity for political parties, positivity for any nothing. I'm talking about positivity generally. Because even doctors will tell you that if you want to avoid a disease or conquer a disease, you must be positive. Even for medicines to show results on your body, the positive mind helps. The negative minds will ensure definitely that will repel possibility of getting cured. So developing, I'm not saying false positive, real positive. It's only a question of how do you look at it. Let's take Mohandas Pai, he's a chartered accountant, very successful professional in corporate sector, now very successful in his business. You are also my colleague on the board of Manipal University. And I've seen he always will talk about how to do things better, bigger, nicer. So I'm not talking about positivity means take the negativity out of a reality. No. I'm saying reality to be positioned in positive way without putting spin on it. I'm not saying put spin on it, but just positivity. Like he talked about $5 trillion economy. I can tell you, I have prepared a document as a commerce minister that is 101% doable. That's a question, how many years? That's a question. I agree with you. I never, in fact, even when I presented a paper, I never claimed that it's going to happen in such period. It depends upon growth rate. But I prepared a strategy also to increase growth rate, both at national level as well as bottoms up approach by district-led growth. Again, I'm not going to discuss all this today, but I'm saying positivity based on data can become a booster for societies. Data, reality, no concoction, nothing. Absolutely put it as it is. But pick up something, because in my mind, right now when I'm talking, it's always a duality. The right and wrong always fight with each other. Whether I should smoke, I should drink, I should eat non-veg, one mind will say don't, one mind will say yes. Whether I should fight with this person, one might say let it go, how does it matter? He has said something. Otherwise, no, you must conquer, you must. So, duality always is, but in society, we can pick up the real good part and try to put it up through a data analysis, not analysis, just take it out and try to do it. That again can be made towards it. I would have loved to talk even much longer on this issue. I love this part. But let me congratulate my young students who opted for this program. And as you were saying, so many applied. That shows the growing interest of my young friends into the whole issue related to data. And this program is I'm very happy that data reveals. Like the great souls of the world, it is the day of revelation. They could peep into themselves, and for them, the reality revealed. I think for you also, through this program, you'll be able to achieve a higher plane of thinking, and the revelation will come to you about what you really need to do and use data as a tool. See, firstly, this is very important. Data is only a tool. It cannot be the mission that I am now in world to create more data. Fine. I mean, if somebody wants to do that, there's nothing wrong. Everybody has a right to do what he feels appropriate. But data is a tool. You must hold it in your hands. It's not allowed to rule you, but you must be able to use it for the betterment of the society, betterment of your own self, and build a better Rashtra. So how do you do that? It's something which all of you must have learned during the course of this very important period. I'm very honored by the fact that you invited me to deliver this convocation address. I have done that in many institutions within India as well as abroad on many different platforms. But I think this is the very first time, probably, I am delivering a convocation address for a friends on data related issues, which is the most emerging issue. Everything will be very related to data. Health data, data about GDP growth, data about almost anything. Whether data about whether I was in parliament on so many days or not, I was out, whatever, every data. So data is data. Now use it for a good of society, good of yourself is a opportunity, challenge. Or use it for wrong of it. Is also something one people can do. Now your job will be to demarcate that line between what is good and what is bad. As they always say, the wisdom, those who hold wisdom, those who possess wisdom are the ones who can draw that line well. And that is what I meant by ethical part of it. So let me congratulate you, all my young students, for having participated in this program. Let me congratulate the faculty in the Rashtam. Let me also congratulate all those brilliant minds who participated into various panel programs, which is also part of education. In fact, this whole idea of education will be delivered through such distinguished people coming there. You can call them guest faculties or others, and contributing to this whole process of enlightening and enriching our thinking on this subject. So let me stop here, because you all are far more better equipped to deal with such issues than me. I'm an old man. You're all youngsters. You have many more years to go. You'll do very well in life. I'm very sure about it. And I must also tell you before you draw your conclusion that Mohandas and Anurag, both being my fellow chartered accountants and friends, don't accept what they told about me because they told about good things about me only because they are my friends. So it's my friendly advice to you. Don't accept their friendly comments. And we'll work together in years to come to build a healthy database society. Everything has to be based on something validation. We can actually use data for validation. So we can use that. But let me congratulate you once again. Thank you once again. And I'm very honored by the fact that Rashtam School is doing such a great thing with which I have some very remote association. I hope that remoteness goes and I become closer to these ideas. Thank you very much. God bless you all.
Thank you, Minister Suresh Mam. Folks, Suresh Mam and I are Konkanis. We speak a language called Konkani, and there we address a person who is elder and who is a thought leader as Mam. Thank you, Minister Suresh Mam. Folks, Minister Suresh Prabhu has told us some extraordinary things. Use data. Data reflects reality. Data can be good, used for the good of society or for the bad of society. Use it for the good of society. Technology is amazing. Use technology, but always use technology for the good of society. Be positive. Think of the Rashtra. Think of the nation. Because if India grows, all of us grow. And Suresh Mam is an outstanding example of a person who has always put his country first. His whole life is a service. How to make India better. Better not for himself, better for everybody. Because, we are living in the land of Rama, Sri Rama. And Rama always spoke about Rama Rajya. Rama Rajya, not to make Sri Rama a greater king, a more powerful king, not to conquer the world, but to make sure that every person living in the land can live with dignity and have the necessities of life. And that is what Suresh Mam has devoted his life to. And that's why what an extraordinary person who gave us the vision of $5 trillion. And now he speaks about how data can make it happen. You're all going to inherit a $5 trillion, $10 trillion economy. And he's not a senior citizen. He's very, very young. His mind is young and is optimistic. Take that optimism and do well, and wish you all the best. I think extraordinary talk, Suresh Mam. Very, very inspiring, very passionate. Thank you very much. Over to Anurag for the closing talk.
So I'm going to take, although I'm not Konkani, I'm going to take the liberty of calling both of you Mohandas Mam and Suresh Mam. It's always a joy listening to you. It's always joy. You see, at a personal level, what is exciting to me, and this is something that I've asked Mohandas ji also separately to teach me, how is it possible to reach extraordinary levels of busyness and success and still be very grounded and pass that on to your children? It was so evident in the talk you gave, sir, that it is so evident that India, the next century we know is going to be Asia's. India, because of our democracy, because of our demographic profile, we are poised to take the world on. We are so glad to have you support us in our vision that data becomes how India leapfrogs into the future and claims its space in the world. Thank you, Suresh Prabhu, Mam. Just the second for the conversation. But Dhanyosmi, sir, thank you so much.
Thank you. God bless you. Thank you.
Thank you, Suresh Prabhuji, for those inspiring words. I'm keen on getting to action and making difference. I'm sure the students and all audience feel the same. Before we declare the list of successful candidates, we have messages from Rashtram School for Public Leadership, course mentors, and some exciting revelations.
Namaste, everyone. This is Shobit Mathur, the Dean and co-founder at the Rashtram School of Public Leadership. Our focus at the Rashtram School of Public Leadership is to build self-aware and civilizationally assured public leaders for Bharat. When you say public leaders, what do we mean? We mean thought leaders, political leaders, and civil society leaders. If you look at these three domains, all of them are today dominated by a lot of narratives that we read in the mainstream media as well as in the social media. The public discourse in this country has been taken over a lot by fake news, opinions that pass off as news. There is not too much of fact or data driven public narratives, and it is time to break that. Rashtraam is glad to partner with Data Reveals in offering this program that all of you have gone through. Through this program, we intend to create the right set of public leaders who are not just better informed, but better equipped to take on the false narratives that have dominated the public discourse of our country. It is not just to create people who would counter the narratives that are dominant today, but also to be proactive and take the right narratives to the right people. Thank you everyone for participating in this program. We have a lot of hope that you would lead the efforts of Rashtraam and Data Reveals in changing the public discourse of our country. Thank you once again.
It's been my privilege to be associated with the Rashtraam program as a mentor. And as I engage with the teams, I realized that the power of data and the power of countering narratives with the help of data and truth is so powerful. One example that I just want to cite in this video is we were looking at the effectiveness of EVM and inclusivity. We realized that the percentage of women voting in Bihar has gone up by almost 20% in the last 20 years as the EVMs have started getting implemented. Similarly, the number of invalid votes have gone down from, let's say, 4 percentage points to less than 0.01 percentage points. So this is a substantial improvement, and this narrative is not coming through in any of the discussions and debates about the effectiveness of EVMs. We should continue to focus on data and continue to focus on what is the right thing to do and make sure that we counter false narratives about India using data and analysis. I just scratched the surface. Obviously, there is more insights to be had as one understands the details and looks through and sifts through the data. And however, the initial response has been really good. So I really want to thank Anurag.
During elections, we find in various media platforms questions raised on EVM sanctity, that they are vulnerable and so on, vulnerable to hacks and so on. So I did some analysis on the above narrative that EVM has led to a loss of confidence in electoral system. And my analysis will be shown, you can see in next two slides, which shows some important outcomes of state of Bihar and Uttar Pradesh. This is two graphs. On the left side is Bihar Assembly elections from 1977 to 2015, where we can see that turnout ratios have dropped and then suddenly took a spike after the EVM introduction. And similar is the case of UP Assembly elections, that after the introduction of EVM, it has again the voters' confidence has risen. My next slide is regarding the vote projections, which you can see in Bihar Assembly elections. After the introduction of EVM, the vote projections have almost reduced to zero, or it has become negligible. Same is the case in Uttar Pradesh Assembly elections. From 2002, when the EVMs were introduced, it has become zero or negligible. So my hypothesis, where I mentioned that EVM has led to a loss of confidence in electoral system, and if that above statement is true, then the slides which I've shown or the data relating to it, that substantial increase in voter turnout and dropping percentage of vote rejections or invalid votes grossly contradicts the hypothesis mentioned above.
I am Parag Agrawal, and I am student of the Data Narratives in Public Domain course from Rashtraman University. As part of my course, I performed a small study which looked at agriculture from the prism of Indian economy and its overall impact. There is a general narrative of late which has been peddled about Indian economy. It is said that Indian economy is heavily dependent on agriculture, and agriculture provides livelihood to 70% of Indian population. As part of the study, I tried looking at this narrative from a data standpoint. Is Indian economy really dependent on agriculture that heavily? Is the contribution of other sectors insignificant? For this, I looked at the relation between agriculture and India's economy from two different data points. As can be seen from the graph on the left, post-independence, about 70% of employable people were occupied in agriculture, but by 2011, the same had reduced to nearly 54%. According to a World Bank study, in 2020, 41.4% of workforce in India were employed in agriculture. So while agriculture is still the main sector of employment, the share of Indians working in agriculture is declining, whereas for the other sectors it is increasing. On the right, you would notice that the contribution of agriculture in Indian GDP has been a constant decline. From 45% post-independence, it has now come down to 15%, whereas other sectors have consistently been seeing increased contribution and have been performing spectacularly. So if the hypothesis is true, then the data relating to increased employment in non-agriculture sector and the increased contribution to the GDP by other sector grossly contradicts the hypothesis mentioned above. Over the years, manufacturing, services, and other industries have contributed significantly to the employment and GDP.
Thank you, Manoj. Thank you, Parag. Thanks for those fascinating studies and analysis that you put together. Thanks for sharing your views that we can share with the larger team. At this point in time, I think it gives me a lot of pleasure to let the world know that it's not just Manoj and Parag who've done stellar analysis as a part of the course. We've had others who've done exceedingly well, all of whom will be receiving a distinction. It gives me a lot of honor and pleasure to let you know that here is the list of candidates and participants who've gotten distinction. If you can all join me in giving a huge round of applause to them. Dhanya, Yash, Meghna, Manoj, Mayank, Parag, Munish, Tarun, Simran, Vijendra, Lieutenant Colonel Raghav, and Sankal. All of you have done a brilliant job with your analysis. Thank you so much for your analysis and being able to go deeper, go into fields and types of analysis that were not commonly thought of, and putting together your analysis. Good job. And this is a round of applause for the amazing work you've done. Also, at this point in time, in addition to these, we would also like to acknowledge and appreciate the other participants who successfully submitted all the project requirements and therefore will also be receiving a certificate of completion from the Rastram and Data Reveals program of data and public narratives. Parv, Akanksha, Diksha, Sahiti, Garvit, Sanket, Aman, and Bhunesh. Good job, well done. We're looking forward to all of you to take forward your learnings, bring it forward, there's a lot more that we can do together. There's a lot that you can do yourselves. Please continue to learn, continue to learn the way you've learned and continue to put your learnings in action and implement what you've learned. Looking forward to being able to change the narrative through contributions from all of you. Okay, so at this point in time, I have a question for all. So now we've heard a great keynote speech, a keynote address by Honorable Minister Smriti Irani ji. We've heard great panels discussions. We've heard a great keynote convocation address. So what next? This is something I'd like to talk to all of you right now listening to. We at Data Reveals have a threefold ask of you. Our ask number one: Next time you hear narratives being played, next time you hear somebody talk about narratives, malign the country, respond and respond with data. We're hoping that in the future, we don't go back and when somebody shows one image of a slum and say India is full slums, we go back and show one image of a building and say here is India is all buildings in urban locations. Instead, we have data about urbanization, full data, and in fact, we hope that you can come to datareveals.org to find this data. We will, and we already have a lot of data that we already have on datareveals.org. We will continue to add more information. Please come to Data Reveals, pick data, as well as go do it if you can't find it on our or on our site and respond with data. Our second ask of you is if there are any one of you who is looking to be able to contribute to the cause, who's invigorated, who's energized, wants to be able to contribute, please join us. Please. This is a completely voluntary organization run by volunteers. We are all people who have other day jobs but still need participants. And if we have to really correct the narrative, if we have to move the envelope forward, move the agenda forward, we need your support. Request all of you to come join us. Anybody who's interested, please come join us. The way to join us is please visit datareveals.org/participate. You will get instructions on how you can join us. And this is the third ask we have. If you think of it, Data Reveals is born, the whole premise of Data Reveals is to be able to correct media narratives, which means the incentive that mainstream media would have to spread the word is actually low. And we are dependent on you. We need you to spread the word. We need your help to let the world know that Data Reveals exists. It's a public utility platform. Anybody can come contribute. Anybody can come use the data. The sources are mentioned. It's all authentic sources that we put in our analysis from. So please come, let the world know that such a platform exists. We look forward to your help. And again, I repeat this, we are dependent on you to be able to move the agenda forward. Speaking of dependency, I have enjoyed Tathya 2021 a lot. And we've been dependent to be able to put Tathya 2021 together. Even before I talk about anybody else that I need to thank, I want to thank the core team. On behalf of Data Reveals, we thank the core team, the able shoulders on which Tathya 2021 happened. If you see, we have Chaitra from Luxembourg, we have Dheeraj Nanduri from Chennai, we have Himanshu from Singapore, Jamin from Mumbai, we have Sukriti from New Delhi, we have Ganesh, again Luxembourg, Ravi, Gurgaon, multiple time zones, multiple countries, all working together to make Tathya 2021 a success. If today Tathya 2021 was a success, it's because of them. Even before I thank anybody else, it's my absolute honor and my duty to thank each one of you for your contributions in making Tathya 2021 a success. Thank you so much. And it will be completely incomplete if I did not do the job of thanking the audience for being amazing, for staying through, for listening, for contributing, for amazing comments. We've seen the ideas. It's so energizing. We're glad that you've found these conversations important. And most importantly, the various speakers who took time on a Saturday morning, joined us and shared their thoughts and invaluable insights. I am super energized about what is in store for the future. I'm really looking forward to, I can't tell you how eager I am to go and start the next analysis, put together the next course of action. I'm extremely excited and looking forward. I'm very, very hopeful that together, you and we can move this whole country forward and give its due credit in the due course. Thank you so much. With this, I hand it back over to Sukriti.
Thank you, Shashankji. Dear all, hope you found these thoughts, ideas, and insights useful. And well, this is not the end, but start of a journey. Remember to tweet, and post using hashtag Tathya2021 about how you like the event and what your big idea is. With this, we call Tathya 2021 to an end. Looking forward to bring a lot of Tathya ahead. Thanks everyone for being an amazing audience. Namaskar.